probably the most important subject for all of us. And that is because your life, the quality of your life will be determined by your boundaries. Now, the quality of your relationships will determine the quality of your life. There's no doubt about that. We know that to be true from health studies, that the longest running study on happiness shows that it's not your blood pressure or your cholesterol that predicts your health at 80, it's the quality of your relationships at age 50, and not just romantic relationships, relationships of all kinds. So we know they're important, but what makes a relationship healthy is great boundaries. What makes a relationship healthy is the ability to be ourselves. So really, boundaries are this delineation between you and I. I'm going to go through the definition of them, but I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about me as soon as I can. There we go. I'm Mark. I used to be a doormat. That's how I like to preface my past. So boundaries were for sure an issue for me growing up. So I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I grew up the youngest of three kids. My father was married before my mom, and my brother and I are from my mother and his marriage, and my sister is from my dad's previous marriage. But we grew up not even, with her as a full sister. We never even really thought about that. My mom's an immigrant from Ireland, so she's from Dublin originally. I love the color blue, which you could tell from the choice of the color on that slide. And I was definitely the sensitive kid in my family. I was highly sensitive, and to give you an idea of how much, my brother used to call me Sensitor. So that was my nickname. So in a way, some of my sensitivity was shamed, and I would sometimes feel overwhelmed with my emotion, but then I wasn't allowed to share it because I was often shamed for it. So I think that life often has very sticky parts, that when we look at our past, there's moments that are sticky, that they're lodged in our memory, and we can go back to those moments and we can feel very clearly how we felt. And they often relate to how we perform in life today with boundaries. So I'll give you some of mine. So when I was in grade 6, 7, 8, I started to put on weight. And in grade 8, I was called a porker. And that led me to having really poor boundaries with food. But we'll talk about what types of boundaries there are. And I would say that mine were overtly rigid. And I think, by all definitions, had an eating disorder. When I was in grade 12, I was at a party that got crashed by a gang, and I got 43 stitches in my head. And because I was actually sort of like this open person before that, I really did love pretty openly. That made it hard for me to trust people sometimes, what they were capable of when I was in public, at bars, at pubs, anything like that. I definitely didn't stand up for myself a lot in relationships growing up. That's why I said I used to be a doormat. So, I've been cheated on in my life. And when I was cheated on and my relationship ended, not by my choice, I made that mean that I wasn't lovable, that I wasn't worthy of being chosen. And if I did let someone love me, they would just leave me or cheat on me. That became the underlying narrative that was living in my life. I didn't know that till I went back and did the work. But when I was 27, I was engaged. And what that experience did with the cheating is that, which was far before that, is that it made me disconnect from relationships. It made me have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I used to drink too much to get rid of my values. I used to have one-night stands. I used to not let any woman who loved me or cared about me or could care about me, I would not allow them in. I would run from them the moment they were like, "Oh, I like you." I'd be like, "Peace out." So when I was 27, I got engaged, and I just couldn't get married. I felt anxious. It didn't feel like the right thing. And I didn't know why. I was pretty lost. I didn't know why I couldn't let someone in. I didn't know why I wanted to get married at 27. I just wasn't ready. And when that engagement ended, that really was the birth of me wanting to learn about relationships, me wanting to learn about how we communicate and all of those different things that make thriving relationships. Because for me, I think that heartbreak is probably the gateway, the best gateway to finding out who you are, to finding out what you've lost. And so when you think about heartbreak and you think about other ways you can lose yourself, other rock bottoms, it can be through finding out about someone else's illness. It could be finding out about your own. It could be going bankrupt, financial difficulty, but I just think breakups are the most common. And they allow us this moment where we don't even have the energy to hold up the walls anymore and to pretend to be something we're not. And so really my life since then has been this journey of sort of unbecoming the things I thought I had to be. So that's who I am, essentially. And that was a fairly in-depth summary of my life. So here's some agreements that we're all just going to live with here, because I think this is the most important part. So my first agreement is I don't really fuck around, in that I like to just say truth, and I love to just talk about what's real. You'll hear me talk a lot about denial in this, because denial to me is it's human conditioning, that we deny what's true. As a kid especially, that's what we initially do. When something hurts, we deny it because we need to deny it to survive. We need to deny it to not feel the pain of the truth. And so denial is the most important thing to be cognizant of, because when you deny how you feel, when you deny what is real, you deny truth. You deny your being. You have to detach from yourself when there's denial. So we don't fuck around today, okay? We're just gonna straight truth, have fun. That's it. I mean, that was fun, right? I got to say fuck, because it's my webinar. All right, so second one is you're awesome. That's just a general assumption, agreement that we have. We are all awesome. We're all capable of change. We're all responsible for our own lives. No one else is responsible for our lives. We are. We live at our highest level of knowledge. This is something I had to learn very hard. And when my engagement ended, I asked myself, how did I get here? How did I get so disconnected from myself? And I realized I wasn't having all the conversations I was afraid of having. That was the first part. And the second part is I would learn something and it would hurt and I would not grow. I would not change. I would redo it. And then I'd call it a mistake. I'd drink too much to do it. And then I'd say it's a mistake, but really it was a choice. And so I made a rule that I would always operate at my highest level of knowledge, that I would always do what I knew to do best. And that comes to, we are always doing the best we can with what we have. And that is true, because till we're ready to shift, we won't shift. We are always doing the best we can with what we have. And the last agreement is, I'm all about integrity, about living in the integrity of our hearts, of our truth, not someone else's integrity, not someone else's truth, but ours. So that's really important. And thank you for your comments, by the way. I love all of you. Okay, so the first part I just want to show you is the thought and concept of neuroplasticity. Actually, before I do that, I want to launch this poll. Tell me if you guys see this. When you think about boundaries, how does it make you feel? That's what I want to know. Excited, scared, anxious, happy? It'll be fascinating is because there's very few things that sort of delineate between these, right? Like in the research, it's shown that excitement and anxiousness are actually very similar. It's just how we frame them. So look at that, right? Like we got 80 people, the other people are peeing, getting coffee, or doing something else. So how strong is that coffee? My coffee is really good over here, Dave. I promise you. Okay, so look at that. So we have anxious, right? So anxiety and excitement are similar emotions in that it's how we frame them. So when they did research and they had people who were about to speak say I'm really anxious versus I'm excited, the people who said I'm excited actually performed better. So I love that we're all anxious, 63% of us, and that some of us are excited. And we could be experiencing a bunch of those. We can be both anxious and excited. We could be both scared and excited. So awesome. Thank you for sharing. Oh, did you guys get the results? My bad for not showing. Okay. So plasticity. So if you're not familiar with the thought of neuroplasticity, it's that we can actually learn how to create new ways of doing things. Now, thoughts that are thought over and over again become beliefs. And there's a saying that neurons that fire together wire together. So the more you do something, the more there is a pathway in your brain that is created to do that thing. And so we have to understand that. Now, it used to be the thought that you couldn't change or learn something different. You know, we had a very static way of thinking about living, but we can learn how to create new neural pathways. I mean, that's fucking amazing to me. And it's not mind-blowing in that, why didn't we know this? And how much of a difference does it make in our bodies to know you can learn how to have awesome boundaries? So this poll is happening. I'm excited to rewire my brain and build some other effing self-worth, right? Give it up. You can raise the roof too. You can use the hand raise. You could do whatever. Make sure, again, if you joined late, that when you're in the chat box, you put it to all panelists and all attendees, not just to me. Okay, so I'll just show those results. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really give you guys an option. That's a beautiful way of sales too. I had a lot of sales training. Okay, so now, sorry, I just have to move my poll there. So there's another bit of research that looks at growth versus fixed mindsets. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, but what's beautiful about this is that Carol Dweck is the researcher who did this work, and she did these tests where pre-adolescent students, and they filled out some challenging questions. And when they were finished, one group was praised for their effort, and another group was praised for their intelligence. So you did really good, you must be really smart, versus you did really good, you must have worked really hard. And what they saw was that the people who were praised for having high intelligence were reluctant after that to tackle difficult tasks. Their performance on tests after that went down. And when she asked them to write a letter to a student from another school that they didn't even know, they would lie about how they performed on the test. 40% of the students who were praised for their intelligence lied about how they scored on the test, adjusting their grade upward. So when we tell people you're really smart, that's why you did well, we believe that there's an inherent skill. You know, we believe that we can't learn something. And relationships can be learned. Love can be learned. Boundaries can be learned. And so it's just so powerful to think a different way. And so here's some growth mindset statements. What can I say to myself? Instead of, I'm not good at this, what am I missing? I'm awesome at this. You could say, I'm on the right track. I give up. I'll use some of the strategies we've learned. This is too hard. This may take some time and effort. See, these statements move from a victim, no outcome game to, I got possibility, I got potential. Nothing is ever static. I can always change. So what is required with boundaries and communication and relationships is also our mindfulness. And so I love this picture. The universe is filled with beautiful things that you probably stepped on while you were staring at your phone. We're going to talk about phones at the very end, but isn't that so true that we're not necessarily mindful of what's going on? And boundaries require mindfulness. They require us actually paying attention to, it requires actually paying attention to how we feel, what's going on in the moment. And so here's the definition from the American Mindfulness Research Association. So it's the state, process, and practice of remembering to observe moment-to-moment experience with openness and without automatic patterns of previously conditioned thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. That's a bit of a mouthful, right? And essentially what we're saying here is it's removing all your former biases and observing your biases, because we all have them, being open to observing them, and being curious about what's going on now. Now, in research on high conflict situations, they see that about 90% of the energy and sort of like the conflict in the part of the argument, 90% of it comes from past experience and only 10% is the current situation. That's why someone might get upset if we're talking about if we leave the toilet seat down and they lose their mind, because it's not about the toilet seat, right? You got to learn that one. So what we're doing is we're starting to think about how we think. We're starting to separate ourselves from ourselves so we can start to think about why we process things the way we do. Why don't we have great boundaries? Why do we need them? All of these different things. Why do we handle conflict the way we do? And I love this quote from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This is like one of my favorite books that I ever read. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And we get to choose. We get to choose everything. And I posted in my caption today on Instagram, I posted some information about Alan Watts that I once read. I was listening to one of his audios, and he said that when we wake up, when we realize one day that we're all God, that we all have conscious choice, that we all get to choose, and that we are all the universe individually walking around. And I thought that was fascinating, and the recovering Catholic in me sort of liked the sacrilegious nature of it. But then as I thought about it more, I really was in this state of understanding of like, everybody is a God. Everyone has the power to create their own world, and our world is our own universe, and together we compose a whole universe together. So there is. So here, what are your intentions for today? I'm very much about guiding where we go. You know, we have a bias as humans that we seek what we believe. We seek what we want to seek and what we want to find. So tell me, if you put it in the chat box, what's your intention for today? What do you want to learn? What do you want to improve? And Dave, you're a recovering Catholic as well. Yeah. I'm sure there's many of us. To stop being a doormat, to be open and present and absorb what I need in order to move forward. Self-love, yeah. To know how to say no without offending, upsetting anyone. New language around setting boundaries, communicating with others, and how to say no without feeling guilty. How to create boundaries with men. They always seem to want to consume all of me, and I let them. Oh, I like the responsibility in that statement. To not fight catastrophically in relationships. I get that. Get my shit together. Get my poop in a group. Yeah, me too. Communication, freedom to be able to love without fear. Have boundaries without being walls. Improve relationships. Learning to disappoint others. Freedom to be more authentic. To have better relationships with my family that are healthy. Not be afraid. Be in my truth. Oh man, I love all of this. I honestly don't know what my boundaries are. I tend to let them all go for others' needs. Yeah, we're going to learn all about this. Speak up for myself, to speak my boundaries timely. You know what's so beautiful about this is look at all these responses, and they're so similar, you know? Like this makes my heart explode reading these, because I have been all of you. I have felt the way most of you feel. In some sense or another, not exactly the same. When we put other people's needs ahead of our own, fuck, right? Isn't that life? And we need to learn that we can let love in, because we're in control of what happens in our lives, and that's boundaries. So, man, I really got to tell you, that makes my heart explode. So what we want to talk about, what I want to do is, there's such a creation of, like, we know that when we change, when we want to do something, we need to move towards positive feelings. So I hope all of you have a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to be able to write down, when I become a boundaries BA, that's badass, by the way, I look forward to. And I want you to create a category for feeling and a category for what you want to create. So write down, I look forward to feeling free. I look forward to feeling loved. I look forward to loving myself. I look forward to creating a beautiful relationship with my family, creating great boundaries with my children. I saw one about being a mom. So it's really important that we move towards things that we love, towards feelings that we want. We know Danielle Laporte's work is all about the desire map. Don't create goals based on things, create goals based on how you want to feel. And that's the same thing in relationships. So as you have your pen out and you're doing that, I want you to answer 4 things, okay? So can you guys give me a raise of the hand to let me know if you're done doing the feeling and creating part? Just so I'm not rushing everyone ahead. Okay, so I'll start slowly and we'll go through. So I want you to identify one person who had knowingly or unknowingly a positive influence in your life, what are the qualities you most admire in that person? And what qualities did you gain from this person? So I want you to write that down. One person who knew or didn't know that they had a positive influence in your life, and what qualities did you most admire from them? And what qualities did you gain from them? So I can think of one of mine is a soccer coach I used to have, who I'm sure I used to irritate him so much because I used to talk back all the time in soccer. And he had a very frank conversation with me once where he told me that I was capable of more and I was operating at average and I was playing small in my life. And he spoke direct truth into my heart. And that's why I moved to Vancouver. So that was 5 years ago because of that conversation. Okay, so one more time. Identify one person who had knowingly or unknowingly a positive influence in your life. What are the qualities you most admire in them? And what qualities did you gain from them? Aren't online workshops so fun? I love them. We have 100 people from around the world. It's freaking awesome. All right, so question number 2. Imagine it is 20 years in the future, 20 years. You have achieved all that you ever hoped to achieve. What is your list of accomplishments? What do you want to have, do, and be at that moment? 20 years from now, you've achieved everything you want. What's your list of accomplishments? What do you want to have, do, and be? I don't know about you guys, but I'd like to be sitting somewhere probably by an ocean. And I would like to have built enough money to move to Vancouver. You can come here, man. You can rent a room. Come on. I would like to, I've always dreamt of getting a place on a lake or the ocean, but I like lakes more. I don't know why. I just do. Okay, next question. Off the grid. Good call, Kim. So next question. What are 10 things that are most rewarding to you today? What do you live for and love in your life? So of the 10 things, they're the things that are most rewarding for you that you live for and love. A houseboat, Sarah. Good call. So 10 things that are most rewarding to you today. What do you live for and love in your life? So think of 10 things. Relationships, connection, great food, adventure, nature, growth, transformation, naps, good call, naps, dogs. Is there an option to choose someone whose influence was negative, but you did learn from them? Yes. Yes, absolutely. They had a positive influence on your life, but their influence was negative. Sorry, they had a positive influence, but their behavior was negative. Yes. I love that question, Laura. Thank you for asking that. Okay, next question. And don't worry, you'll get copies of all this. I just don't want to, we have a lot of stuff to get through and I want to get through it. So imagine your celebration of life is happening in 5, 10, 15 years, hopefully a lot longer than that. That was a bad year time. Imagine your celebration of life is happening in 70 years and there's people giving speeches about you and your life. What character or characters would you like them to have seen in you? What contributions, achievements would you want them to remember? And when you look at the people who are around you, the people who matter most to you, what difference would you have liked to make in their life, or like to have made in their life? So what character would you have liked the people giving speeches about you? What characters would you like them to have seen in you? What contributions, achievements would you want them to remember? What difference would you have liked to have made in their lives? I realized it's not a funeral, it's a celebration of life. I wrote this earlier, and a funeral's a lot worse than a celebration of life. It could be a birthday party. Yeah, that was a great soccer coach I had, Dave. So imagine you're at a celebration of your life. Okay, so what characters would you have liked them to have seen in you? What character traits? What contributions, achievements would you want them to remember? And what difference would you have liked to have made in people's lives? And so essentially what we're doing, everyone, is we're getting to know you, what your values are, what your integrity is, what you desire, what you're passionate about. What a great thing to learn from someone. My impossibly perfect worthiness. Aren't we all, I went to once to a talk, it was from Lisa Nichols. She's badass. And she was like, no one identifies with perfection. Perfection is bullshit. That's why when we were liking these perfect people on Instagram, it's bullshit. It's all facade. We love authenticity, right? Ashley, authenticity, lots of laughter, presence, openness, joy. We love real. We crave real. We crave real. And all of us, when we saw that list of all the things we want, my God, we're all the same. Okay, so don't worry, you guys get a list of all of this, so you don't have to worry about that. For any latecomers, remember, you got the chat window. Make sure it goes to all panelists and all attendees so everyone can read it. And if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A and I'll answer them at the end. Okay, so what's gonna happen? First, it's already happening. We did the welcome thing. Secondly, we're gonna go through what are boundaries? Why are we so bad at them often? How do we create them? And then life of bliss. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so signs you have awful/0 boundaries. You're feeling burnt out and exhausted. You're resentful. You might have hate, anger, right? That's probably a better word. But, and 3, depressed, disconnected, sad, lost, insecure, afraid, lacking emotional safety and core relationships. Number 5, angry, frustrated, passive aggressive. And 6, powerless, stagnant, avoidant, and a victim. Now, these are going to be, we might have more than one of them. And we'll go to feeling them, and then that'll be a sense that we need to have a boundary, and then we'll shift out of it. So remember, I'm going to get more into feelings, but feelings are information. So, can you repeat the last question? Sorry about that. The last question was, imagine you're at your celebration of life, people are giving speeches, what characters would you like them to have seen in you? What contributions, achievements would you want them to remember? And when you look at the people around you, what difference would you like to have made in their lives? Okay, so this is the sign that we have some bad boundaries, which I like to reframe as opportunity for improvement. So, all right, let's get down to business. Okay, so currently in my life, I have the following feelings. That's why I'm here. I'm burnt out, exhausted. I got a little bit of anger up in here. I'm depressed, disconnected, and sad. I'm lost. You could pick more than one, I believe. Lost, insecure, afraid. I'll tell you which ones I'm experiencing. I experience frustration lately. A little bit of disconnection, burnt out. And you know what? I think that's what's leading to the other ones. I'm learning that I have to say no to more shit, right? Okay, we'll give it another couple seconds. We got 67, 68, 69. Oh, this coffee is so good. Okay, I'm gonna end the bowl. All right, look at this, guys. 71% of us are feeling lost, insecure, afraid, and lacking emotional safety in core relationships, right? You know, depressed, disconnected, sad, burnt out, and exhausted is a fascinating one because that's usually related to our work and our families. You know, so it's amazing how much our work has such an impact on us. That's why when people talk about work-life balance, I'm like, that's such a bullshit statement because life is work and home. You can't create this line between the two. You bring your work home and you bring your home to work. There's no way to stop that. So thank you for sharing that, guys. Okay. Did you guys get I think you got the results. Yeah, we did. Okay. All right. So what is a boundary? So this is a definition from, I think, Webster's. Something such as a river, a fence, or an imaginary line that shows where an area ends and another begins. A point or limit that indicates where two things become different. Now, there's a great book by Anne something. She's wonderful. Anne Catherine. And it's called Boundaries, Where You End and I Begin. And so boundaries are essentially this life system of yes and no's. They're stop signs and borders that you install to protect yourself. And they really protect us so that we can have authentic expression, so that we can live the way we want, love the way we want, and relate the way we want. Boundaries are limits that are set between ourselves and people due to thoughts, activities, and things that really aren't in our best interest. So everything, I remember hearing this when I was younger, everything that's in your life got there because you said yes to it. And I was like, ooh, that's a lot of responsibility. But everything in our life got there because we said yes to it. We have to begin to take responsibility for it. Now, here's the beautiful, beautiful, most powerful part about boundaries is that the better your boundaries are, the better you'll feel about yourself because they're symbiotic. When you say that's not okay, the message you're sending to yourself is, this is how I am worthy of being treated. So self-worth and boundaries are interrelated, totally connected, and they're part of a system. The better your boundaries are, the better you feel about yourself. The better you feel about yourself, the better your boundaries are. You think Beyonce walks around and like lets people tell her what to do? She's Bae, or whatever people call her, Queen Bae or B, whatever it is. So I was like, when I'm working with people, I'm like, what would Beyonce do? I know people used to say, what would Jesus do? But what would Beyonce do? You know, it's a great question. And so there's different types of boundaries. So the first one is physical. And, you know, we know that our physical boundaries are, you know, they're limited by our skin. But we also have another boundary that extends beyond our skin. So if you think of the plant in the center as being you, depending on the relationships you have with people will determine whether they're allowed to get closer to you or not. So we become aware of this when someone stands too close to us, right? Have you ever been near someone who's like a close talker and you're like, boo, like back it up, buddy. And there's sort of like this invisible circle that's there, that this comfort zone. And that zone can be fluid, right? Boundaries are flexible. They can move depending on the relationships we have. So the zone is fluid. And like, let's say, for example, your partner, your lover, whatever, can stand closer to you than most friends. And some friends can stand closer to you to other people. And a friend can stand closer than a stranger. And with someone who's angry, might need a lot more space. That might be like the very distant cactus in the far right corner, which is kind of, I mean, that makes sense that that's an angry plant. But if you think about this picture being your different social relationships and the external environment being everything outside of that plant in the pot being the skin, then you have this idea, and a good way to conceptualize it is to put, if you're ever, you know, you buy some twine and you circle it around you on the floor, and you can start to feel about when people get near you, how does it feel having them in these boundaries that you can create? And you just get more practice in building awareness about, hey, when I check in with my body, this person's a little close to me. And like I said before, we all know what that's like, where it's like, woo, back it up. Okay, so there's another 4 types of boundaries. So there's 5 in total. So there's emotional, how I feel. And then there's sexual, how I want to be touched, how I want to touch you. There's relational, who you are to me. And there's spiritual, what my beliefs are and how I practice those beliefs. So I'll give you guys some examples. So emotional boundaries, how I feel is my responsibility. How you feel is your responsibility. Like when someone says, you don't make me happy, it's not my job to make you happy. It's your job to make you happy. But if I'm doing behaviors that upset you, that's different. But I'm not in charge of someone else's happiness, and I'm in charge of my own. And when we learn that, we take the responsibility away from someone to determine how we feel about ourselves, which is powerful. That's a huge shift. We're going to keep talking about that. So we feel responsible for, a lot at times, even guilty when we hear someone else's problems or negative feelings. That's an emotional boundary. We're allowing ourselves to absorb their emotions. We have this impulse, right, that we want to do something when someone is upset. Their problems and responsibilities become ours. And if you take on more than 50% of the responsibility in a relationship, and if it's not working, you blame yourself. This tends to be the behavior that we have when we have poor emotional boundaries. We might try to meet our partner's needs, but we don't meet our own. We may even blame ourselves for our partner's sexual dysfunction, addictions, depression. So this is taking on someone else's boundaries. So relationally and sexually, I think is pretty implied. What you're comfortable doing, what you're comfortable receiving, all of those things. Relationally, do we want them as friends? Are they an acquaintance? Do we enter, we even enter relationships with people we don't even like. I was once working with this amazing client who she said to me, I don't have to go for dinner with people I don't like. And I was like, no, you don't have to fucking go for dinner with people you don't like. Like that's a clear boundary. So here's a big one, right? Relationally, this is what happens. Let's say we have an ex that we've spoken about having zero contact with, but they reach out every once in a while. What do they call it? Zombieing, where they just rise from the dead and they reach out to you. That's a breaking of a boundary. But you know how they do it? They do this little soft thing where they're like, how are you? Merry Christmas. What's going on? Oh, I thought about you today. No, you didn't. Shut your fucking phone off. Don't message me. We have to see that relationally, they're an ex. They no longer get access. So that is a relational boundary. Spiritually, there are core values, right? Like we just went through what spiritually is for people. As you build that value system and how you'd like to be seen in the world, that will be something that you can build this around. Now, most people have never really defined their core values, and they really have, a difficulty in understanding why they're conflicted and why they have chaos in their life. But in the spiritual life, we need to understand, what is our belief system? What's important to us? Who are we? And what do we do on a daily basis? And having that violated isn't fair. Okay, so we have a question for Megan. What's the difference between taking on emotional shit and being empathetic? Empathy is understanding someone else's situation and being willing to help them out if you want to, understanding it. Taking someone's shit is the moment you feel like you're like, ugh, like I don't want this. You have to check in with yourself, because just because someone wants to talk to you about something doesn't mean you have to talk to them about it, right? Like if you feel like you need to instead of you get to, that's a big difference. Like if you have a best friend who's always talking about the same problem with different people and the same shit, eventually we get to a place where we're like, yo, like you got to back up, you got to check yourself because you're going through the same cycles. There's a boundary. But what usually happens to us when we take too much from someone? We fucking explode. We pressure cooker it, right? We become, and that's our reactivity because we're not honoring our boundary early. So we have to see that early on is an opportunity for shifts constantly, this dance. And in relationships, that dance is really important because we're consistently teaching people how to treat us, right? So if you know that you are an exploder, that means that you're not speaking earlier, which is a really beautiful opportunity because we fear, right, being rejected. I'm going to go through that. So there was one comment there that said, tougher boundaries when the ex is still your child's father. True, but you still get to choose what behavior is okay and what is not. Yes. And of course, like being able to, that's a more of a conversation than just answering the Q&A. So the other one was, yes, that being about empathetic or compassionate. Remember, you could still be empathetic and have a line of where you don't want to talk about something. You could still be empathetic and not give yourself away. Empathy is not giving yourself away. That's been misconstrued. That's been taught to us by parents who did everything for everyone. And let's be honest, biologically and socially, women are often conditioned to give away themselves in order to make everyone happy. Biologically, we've sort of wired that way. So, okay. So here's types of boundaries. So we have healthy boundaries, we have porous boundaries, and we have rigid boundaries. So a healthy boundary is we connect with others while holding on to ourselves. So you're you, I'm me, I'm still connected to you. We express our opinions and perspectives while respecting the views or choices of others. Other people are allowed to have their feelings too. Porous boundaries. We absorb or take on that which is not ours. We intrude into that which is not ours. Rigid boundaries. We block the input of others. We restrain or hold ourselves back from others. So again, we come back to this, like, boundaries is the space between me and then not me, right? And this is the interactions between me and the physical world. So the first type of boundary is as Alexander Solomon calls it, connected and protected. You feel connected, but you're also protected. The second one, a porous boundary, is connected and not protected because things are seeping through. We're allowing things to happen. The third one is disconnected and protected. We're protected, but we're not connected. It's a wall, right? So a healthy boundary. So I'm going to give you some ideas on this. So a healthy boundary is open enough to allow new ideas, thoughts, and resources to enter when we need them, but it's also sufficiently closed to protect us from harm. Ideally, the closeness is neither overbearing nor intrusive, but comfortable and protective. So a porous boundary, an example of a physical, permeate is a line. Like if you think of a line drawn in a sand, you can see it's there, but it's really nothing to stop you from jumping over the line, right? And so sometimes a wave comes in and washes it away. But in terms of emotional and less physical boundaries, we can think of the things that overtake us and keep us from thinking and responding. We allow everyone to come into our lives without taking into consideration if they're safe. We trust too easily. And for most of us, having overly permeable boundaries will allow unwanted emotional and mental assault from others when we need to protect ourselves from those people. And also, permeable boundaries may mean that we let too much of ourselves out. And as Brené Brown talks about oversharing and limiting, we need to limit our level of privacy. We need to have a limit on our privacy, like a protection about who we are and our own sense of self. And often we just allow everyone into that and we just overshare. And then rigid boundaries, you could think of that like a brick wall. It can't be moved without any force. A person with rigid boundaries is usually closed off so no one can get in. And other people with overly rigid boundaries do not allow others to get in, emotionally, physically. They don't allow us to be open and to have new thoughts or ideas. It's not a fun way to live. All right, okay. Everyone, again, I love what you're saying, Teresa. Everyone has hope. Let's understand, we can all be boundary badasses. I used to be a doormat. And now I'm like a recovering doormat. I have great boundaries now. And when I don't, I know that I don't, and then I have them. You have to lose yourself to find yourself. You have to know what isn't in alignment to know what is alignment. You have to be out of integrity to know what integrity is. But the point is to always live at our highest level of knowledge, to always rise. So we're going to launch a little poll here. What kind of boundaries do you have, my friends, as I sip my water to rehydrate? Oh, we're killing the game here. And we can have more than one type depending on the relationship we're in, okay? And Hera, I hope I said that right, switching between porous and rigid, that makes sense because what happens when we let the porous boundary in? I'm gonna end this poll so you guys can see it. Okay, share results. Look at that, guys. Most of us have porous boundaries. Can we all just get together? We can raise our hand to say, fuck porous boundaries now. Like, fuck them. Like, let's raise the roof here. Let's blow the ceiling off this mofo. Let's learn how to create healthy boundaries. And this will be the last day that we allow shit to determine how we feel about ourselves. Fuck that. Okay. So, and remember, we want to be different than, like, fuck porous boundaries, but not fuck people. Because well, I don't mean fuck people, but normally our response when we're learning about boundaries is we push everyone away instead of learning how to relate to them. That's the key, is because what happens is you end a relationship, or you do, and don't get me wrong, sometimes ending the relationship is the right choice, but often what we do is we push everyone away, but we still haven't changed how we relate to people. So we have to continue to build that skill. So I love this. And so when a couple of you said that I switch between two. So the reason that happens is because a boundary gets crossed and a response is a rigid boundary, a wall, a push away, a withdrawal. And so that's what happens. So when we haven't honored this, this happens. But if we have a healthy boundary and it gets violated, we have a consequence. And you might think of it as a rigid boundary, but it's not. It's actually protective. It's a healthy boundary to say, no longer do you have access to me. No longer is that behavior okay. This relationship's over. That's a healthy boundary. So that doesn't become rigid if it's created from a healthy space. But isn't that insane that we all, like 89% of us, are rocking some porous boundaries? God, I don't even know what's good that's porous. I don't even know. Volcanic rock is porous. It's nice. Okay. All right. We found something. Okay. So, oh man, we're in the meat of it. I love it. I love it, guys. Saturday. So fun. Okay. So what do good boundaries do? Why are they important? So good boundaries help define your identity. They're the thing that create who you are. Now, they also protect you from people who are violators, people who, are bad, who aren't safe for us. And they also allow, so when I say they define your identity, they allow you to express your true self, to ask for what you want and need. They bring order, they promote you. So if you have really good boundaries at work, if a boss knows you have good boundaries, they're like, we could trust them because they're always going to tell us clearly what's going on for them. They're always going to give us feedback. And they're going to work passionately, but without burnout. You have to remember that if your company has a culture where you are supposed to burn out and not have boundaries around your time, that is a violation of your time. It's a violation of you, but we're allowing it. That's the key. I'm a big believer that, you know what? Like if someone's not meant for me or a job's not meant for me because it's out of my integrity or it doesn't honor me, I don't need it. I don't live in a scarce world anymore. And I used to. I used to hold on to things because I was so scared. So they protect yourself from control of other people. And, they protect who you are, but the personal assets you have, the physical part of you, but your knowledge, your body, your skill set, your abilities, your purpose, your mission, they allow those things that we were talking about of like, what do you want people to say about you when your life is not at the end, but when it's being celebrated? What they want, and what you want to do is preserve that path so that you can go do it, so that you can be that person. And if people don't allow you to be that person, that's because you're allowing them not to allow you. That makes sense? I hope so. And they allow you to, as I said before, build amazing self-worth. All of that stuff is saying I matter. That's it. That's why self-worth isn't just this magical journey where one day you wake up and you're like, I love myself. It's like one day you love yourself because you did a great choice, and then the next day you might have did something out of alignment and you have to choose again. It's this constant set of habits and rituals. Okay, so let's look at some of these questions. Okay, weaker boundaries, better boundaries at work, weaker boundaries in personal life. Yes, and that makes sense, and we'll talk about it. I take on too much emotionally from my spouse, and it's definitely not healthy for either of us. Be more clear. Yes, Dave, I'd love to hear that. Because remember, when you have great boundaries, you free another person. Because you're inviting them to grow, you're inviting them to change, you're inviting yourself to grow. We have to see that great boundaries are healthy for everyone involved. And the research, when you look at codependency and addiction, healing an addict isn't enabling them. It's actually going and healing ourselves, which is removing ourselves and taking care of ourselves. Mark, do you think creating healthy boundaries can change how you impact other people's boundaries? I worry other people are too porous with me and will cut me off or something. You have to allow other people their response, but you don't get to choose for them. Okay, so if you have some other questions in here, I feel sorry for the person I'm setting boundaries with. Yeah, that's the curse of the empath and not having emotional boundaries around you taking on other people's feelings. Hey, I've been there. Shit, I get it. I'm like, worried people will be disappointed. But then you lay down the law and then you see that life feels good and they get on with it. They learn about it. But why would anyone change if someone's doing everything for them, right? Okay. So if you guys have questions, you got to put them in the Q&A because I got to get through this. So why don't we have boundaries? What gets in the way of them, right? What gets in the way of boundaries? So Brene Brown has this beautiful quote. A deep sense of loving and belonging is an irreducible need for all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we're meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we hurt others, we get sick. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, be loved, and to belong. So this is both a good thing and not a good thing. And I'll explain why. So the first part is evolution, right? Evolution has said to us that if you don't fit in, you're fucked. If you don't fit in, we will exclude you from our tribe. We will, if you don't believe what we believe, if you don't love the way we love, if you don't fit in, then you will be excluded from this tribe. And that means that in some sense, we have to adapt and become like the people around us. We have to adapt and take on beliefs and systems that are not ours in our true essence. Now, historically, that's pretty hard to escape, but we almost didn't even know we were doing it, right? Like the people who woke up to it felt immense pain and they became witches and philosophers and speakers and people who changed the world, right? So we have to recognize that there is a biological experience that's going on first. And that's why it can sometimes on a cellular level feel almost impossible to disconnect from someone who is important to us, even though they hurt us. So, and this is really wired in us from a sense of loneliness. Like we're all wired to connect, as Brene Brown taught, we need each other. And when we have a threat that someone is not gonna be there, it's terrifying to our bodies and our souls. On a biological level, research has shown that inflammatory markers go up and the same parts of our brain that register physical pain light up when we're hurting from emotional rejection. Not crazy? So, I mean, there's a couple theories on this. One is that there's sort of like the altered immunology, the increase in inflammation is a defensive reaction from the body. And it thinks we've sort of like, because we've been disconnected from our tribe, we're going to be wounded in the near future. So there's no one to protect us. So we better go find someone because we're in physical pain. And another theory is that if you feel bad, you're more inclined to seek help from others. And so emotional pain of loneliness sort of acts as physical pain to tell you something is wrong and needs to be addressed. Now, incredibly, the level of toxicity from loneliness is insane. The mortality rate for air pollution is 5%, and for loneliness, it's 25%. Like that's insane. So this is why when we talk about like rejection is literally hurting, it's because the brain processes emotional and physical pain in the same way. Now there's being connected to other people is super important, and our attachment system is sort of piggyback to physical pain because it helped us evolve. It helped us stay in groups. It helped us when we're hurting because we might be rejected, we'll conform. And so there is a biological thing again that's going on, and I want you to be able to understand that sometimes our biology isn't serving us. Okay, so the other way that it comes from is we learn our boundaries from our family or lack thereof. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the frameworks of the family we come from and what they create, you know. But when you look at your family system and where you come from, and if you just go up 5 generations, assuming no divorce, you have 30 people's stuff funneling into you. You have communication patterns and ways of being. And that's why you usually see like people who are codependent, who take care of addicts with addicts. And you just see this funnel of similarity, or you see like abusers with people who are being abused. And it just like funnels down because we haven't learned an alternate way of being, because there really hasn't been an education platform for that. And we haven't had the freedom of choice as much as we do today. I mean, we're in this world for the most part, but not everyone gets to experience that, which is a sad truth. And that's why we have to fight for it through fighting for it ourselves. And so when you think about your family system, I want you to, you know, like I used to think my family, you know, my family is great. I love my family. And we have our stuff, because we all have stuff. So what do you guys think? You know, there's some people that believe, I know there's always one person who's like, false, I'm gonna click the one that I shouldn't click. But you know, like I'm just opening my thermos here so I can get more caffeine. But all families have our stuff, and they're all different and similar, you know, in that like, we all have crazy aunts and uncles. We all have cousins who are weird. We all have like family dysfunction. We all have some forms of abuse in families. We all have this in different areas of our family system, which is, you know, when we accept that reality, then we can at least own it. I mean, we got the one person, yeah. So let me just go to the next one. Okay. So here's the different types of family. So enmeshed. So this is where the self and the other are not delineated, right? Where we overlap, where we require each other. So people in enmeshed relationships are defined by the relationship rather than their individuality. They don't have an identity. So our self-worth depends on our relationship. If our relationship goes bad, we feel bad. If our partner feels upset, we feel upset. We are completely interlocked. And we take on our partner's feelings, we take on our parents' feelings when we're enmeshed with a parent. And so it's sort of like we depend on each other to fulfill our emotional needs. You make me feel good, you take care of me, you make me happy. And so we feel whole, happy, and good. But when we do it, even in an enmeshed relationship, it sacrifices our psychological health in a way. And so our self-concept, what we believe about ourselves, is defined by the other person. And that's a power that no one wants to give away, let me tell you. But we do it, and then we need to figure out how to get it back. Because most of us, because of the way we've evolved, have made, if you choose me, if you love me, if the family keeps me, if the group likes me, if I'm safe in the group, that's better than me being safe within myself. I will sell myself out in order to be loved by those around me. But when we do that, we abandon ourselves. We abandon who we truly are. So loneliness really comes from within, which is crazy to think, right? The rejection, abandonment, all of these things not being enough, we put them outside of us, but the person outside of us, if this makes sense to you, is just an expression of what is already going on. And so, you know, we can't choose something we don't believe we're worthy of. You know, like if I don't believe I'm worthy of a great relationship, I can't pick it. I can't create it because I'll get myself in the way of the belief that's deep down. So here's some signs that you might be in an enmeshed relationship. You neglect other relationships because of a preoccupation or compulsion with your current one. Your happiness or contentment relies on your relationship. Your self-esteem is contingent upon the relationship. And when there's conflict or a disagreement in your relationship, you feel extreme anxiety or fear. And you have this compulsion to fix it. And when you're not around the person or you can't talk to them, a feeling of loneliness sort of like invades your psyche. And without the connection, the loneliness increases to a point where you sort of create irrational desires to reconnect. Or there's a symbiotic emotional connection. If they're angry, as I said, anxious, depressed, you're also angry, anxious, or depressed. So you sort of absorb the feelings of the other person. Now this can happen if we had to parent as a child because we had to take on the parenting role. This can happen because our mom or dad became best friends with us and confided in us. We are enmeshed with them. We're taking on their feelings. We can have this where our mom or dad live vicariously through us because they didn't get a childhood, which just perpetuates the same cycle, right? And so this is where other people's needs matter more than my own, okay? And recognize that as we're learning this and understanding this, it's never too late or too soon to learn something, and we can always change, and you're all getting this at the exact right moment. Okay, sorry, I'm confused between the ideas that we all need connection, but that loneliness comes from within. Yes, so Megan, we all need connection, as in, if I can depend on you and need you in a healthy way where there's a separation between us, I will do more, I'll feel more powerful, I'll do, you know, like if we touch, I'll experience love, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, I'll feel fulfilled. But if I have to sell out who I am to be with you, if I have to pretend to be something I'm not to be with you, I'll still have an innate sense of loneliness. I'll still have an innate sense of abandonment. I hope that makes sense. That like, as I learn how to express myself more authentically and give power to my voice, I will start to feel more fulfilled. I'll start to feel more powerful. I'll start to feel my essence and my truth. Okay? Okay, so the next type, so pay attention to this because this is really, so childhood here. So if we had a distant or absent father or mother or caregiver, doesn't matter, this is the space between that we go self, other. So there's a huge space between us. Now, a bunch of things can happen because of this. And again, we're not going to create stories because you can have all of these experiences and create healthy relationships because you went and learned how, because of what happened. But what can happen with self and other is, first off, if you're enmeshed or you're distant like this, you might not even know that you can have needs, because when you're enmeshed, your parents' needs, or if you had a parent who was an alcoholic, an addict, a brother or sister who has a chronic disease, a parent with a chronic disease, everything was always around someone else's needs. But when it's in this, and so what happens is we don't even have our own needs. We don't even have our own emotions, our own identity. We have to learn how to cultivate it, which we all can. Now, when a parent is distant or absent, the same thing can happen. I don't have needs because no one was here to listen. I had to self-parent. I had to take care of myself. So I always had to take care of other people. And I don't even know, like the belief that we start to create within is like, I'm not worthy of being attended to. I'm not worthy of being chosen. Because you have to remember that a child's world is narcissistic in a sense. Till we're about 7 or 8, the world is about us, in that everything that we need to be fed, we need to be taken care of, we need to be clothed. But at the exact same time, what's also happening is when it doesn't happen, we make that about us because the world is about us. So a healthy relationship has these spaces where it's us and them, but there's this, we have our own identities, we have our own friends, we have our own needs, all of those things. And the relationship is a separate, you know, my dad once said to me that a relationship is a separate organism, that there is you and there is them, and then there is what you create together. And when I was 21, he told me that, and I was like, yeah, Dad, whatever. But I remembered it. And I remembered it because it was powerful to think, you know, most of us think of our relationships and we go, I'm not getting what I need from my relationship. But the truth is a different question. What does my relationship need from me? Does it need boundaries? Does it need communication? Does it need investment? Does it need some deposits in the emotional bank account, as Stephen Covey refers to? That when we do things, you know, relationships need trust. Trust is essential. And if we can't trust ourselves, how do we trust our partner? If we can't trust ourselves to speak the truth and to share our feelings and to stand up for ourselves, how can we ever trust other people? And we'll often let in people that break our trust because we don't trust ourselves. So they validate what we believe about ourselves. Megan, how do I stop caring so much? Here's an important part. Don't stop caring. Stop caring for people who hurt you. Stop giving your love away to people who have not earned it. I still want everybody to love all out and to care and to be open into this world, which, you know, if we love people, we're going to be hurt. That's, you know, there's always an equal and opposite potential of getting hurt when you love someone. But we have to have guards and protection around our love. We have to stand in our truth. Because if I say to my partner, here's how I feel, here's what's going on, and she says, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore, that will hurt. But I'm not stopping how much I care. If she leaves, it'll hurt my, you know, I'll be sad, but I'll still love me for standing in my truth. You know, and that's when there's a difference between if she leaves, she takes my self-worth with her, versus if she leaves or stays, I still love me. And that is the most powerful moment to get to, where no matter what you do, I will still love me and you'll still love you, because your feelings aren't my responsibility and my feelings aren't your responsibility. Okay, tricky dealing with that, yes, okay. How does trusting yourself influence trust with others? I'm not quite getting that. Okay, so if you trust yourself to honor your feelings, your thoughts, what you need, what you want, then you will only allow people in your life who actually mirror that truth. So let's say one of your needs is emotional safety and fidelity. We're like, which I think for most people, those are hand in hand. We all need that in order to open up. So when we have that need and we stand in the truth of that, right away we energize differently. Because if someone comes in who's like, I don't know, for sake of another term, like a player, right? They come in and they send the odd text and we're like, hey, I noticed that you're a little inconsistent with your messages. Just wondering what you're looking for in a relationship or whatever you ask. And that scares them away because they're not ready for that level of communication and commitment. We have to see that relationships are sorting. This question right here is from Megan. That's because that's why they always leave. Not everyone leaves when we stay in ourselves. When we stay present to our feelings and we say, this behavior is not okay, and they leave, I'm present to me. I've stayed for the first time. So what happens is I'm not abandoning myself to keep a relationship. And when I stay present to myself, I'm indestructible. I'm unstoppable. And then the moment you say you let that person go who leaves, because they leave, I think of leaving as being a gray filtration process. It's like they broke up with us so that we didn't have to break up with them. So there's like this, and I always think like rejection is just saving us from mediocrity in some sense, So the shift is when people leave, they don't take me with them. Because in order for them to leave, I stood up for myself, I asked for what I needed, and they left. I stayed. I'm present. What matters more is you stay. Okay, so I gotta just bump ahead a bit. So understand that 95 to 99% of what we do is subconscious. So these messages we were sent as children. And so you have to begin to look at what we're taught about relationship comes from family, comes from evolution, comes from our cultures, comes from our societies. When we send messages like kids are meant to be seen, not heard, when we, all these different things that we've been sent about a woman's role in a family, a man's role in a family, how we handle conflict, all of these different things. So I want you to describe your boundaries. I want you to grab your pen and paper. And I want you to write down the boundaries that your family had in the following areas. So about money, did they tell you all about their debt? Did they tell you they were poor? Did they tell you you were struggling? Did they, did they over-communicate or under-communicate with money? And then personal belongings, like, did someone read your diary? I want you to write this down on a piece of paper. Did they violate your space? Did they go into your room without knocking? Sex and nudity. Like I have one friend whose dad used to tell him about all the sex the parents were having and all these different things. And yeah, so nudity, what was that? What were the boundaries you had around that? Physical touching, showing affection, emotional, respect-free feelings. No, you don't feel that way. No, you're not hurt. And the last one, respect for your thoughts and opinions. Was there space to be you? Was there space to have the thoughts and feelings you have, from it? And remember, all of these can, you can have someone read your diary and that also be a emotional and mental boundary that's broken. And Anya, you said, what about if you feel like some of your needs are actually fear and insecurity based on not necessarily healthy or authentic? A great way to do that is to consult with someone else, with someone you trust. Ask, is this realistic or is it not? Because a lot of people, when we have boundaries, won't like our boundary, because why would they want to have to change? And so they can say you're crazy. I can't believe, no, that's not fair. You don't feel that, they invalidate it. You're just controlling, you're just insecure, or you're just whatever, right? And so it's giving yourself permission and making reasonable requests. I'm going to teach you guys how to create a boundary. So if they didn't let you do it or made you feel bad about expressing, being sensitive or give hugs, that's rigid. Yeah. And it doesn't allow you the nurturing and love that you receive, right? They're holding you at a distance. And they're not healthy, safe boundaries because they're not able to acknowledge, like, maybe I'm busy right now, maybe I need to get this done, but you're still loved and safe. What if I felt that my family didn't always appreciate or respect my emotions, but I can't think of specific examples? In other words, my memories are often different than what my family remembers. Well, I'm going to teach you a process on this, and what's important is to understand that you have the right to your feelings and no one else gets to tell you you don't feel that way. Right? Like, you have the right to feel the way you feel and no one else gets to tell you different. We can both people can have the exact same situation and totally different experiences. Just like you and I can both drink this coffee and you can have a totally different feeling about the coffee. Just like you and I can both have the same father and mother and have totally different experiences based on what was going on between them at the time that we were born and based on our space in the family. I can see where my volatile shift from in different areas comes from. Didn't look at it in this perspective. I'm porous and my hubby rigid. It makes sense because my dad used to say, I'll give you something to cry about. I wasn't allowed to talk back and I never knew that was going to set him off. Thanks for sharing, Megan. That is, that you look at how that can show up for us today. Like, if we share what we need, we're afraid that we'll then get something to cry about, that we'll get further hurt. Dave, I need to start drinking, then do all this homework. Lots to learn and work towards those healthy boundaries. Have a boundary with alcohol as you dive deep. I like to try, we often have, and this is not to you, but we often have this access to ourselves when we drink because we lower this guard, the sense of anxiety. And often we also have access to our shadow, to the parts of us that are unhealed, which was what was happening to me when I wasn't letting anyone love me, is I would overdrink because I didn't love myself. Oh, it is rigid. You don't drink. Well, that's a good point there, Dave. Mine was not rigid. Mine was porous at the least. Okay, so here's a question. So do you have a challenge letting people in, getting close, or do you tend to chase love and you get anxious and obsessed over others? So here you go. And there's the option of flipping and flopping. Great question, Hera. Being porous with money, would that equal to sense of not having enough? Being porous with money might be like we overspend and then get into debt and then come out of it. And then we withdraw from spending and we get into the serious strict because we haven't learned the healthy relationship of the energy with money. It's really important. Money is an energy. And so often we overspend, because I have definitely done this. I just am healing my relationship to money because we have negative beliefs about rich people, about wealthy people. And so we'll never allow ourselves to accumulate wealth. And that's why wealth is just a system. It's an understanding of the relationship to money, which sounds simplifying, and I don't mean to simplify it. Okay, so we have 81 votes in. Okay, so here's the results, guys. So we flip-flop between the two is the winner, but I chase love, I love love, I get anxious and obsessive, I tend to overthink things. So here's how we show up today based on what we experienced as children and past relationship experiences. So if we have a challenge letting people in and getting close to us, then we tend to be more distant or absent. We probably have more rigid boundaries and maybe porous, and we probably flip between those two. We might think of them as healthy, and we'll come up with narratives like when people love, they need too much. In attachment theory, that would be considered avoidant attachment. I'll send you guys information on attachment theory, so don't worry about that. I chase love, I love love, I get anxious and obsessive, I tend to overthink things. So that is what we would call an anxious attachment. So we're afraid that people will leave us. We're afraid that, and this can often come from enmeshment, but it can also come from people being really distant from us because we're like, well, when I love people, they leave me. A really great sentence to answer is, when I let people love me, they. And you can start to see what the underlying story is that lives in your subconscious that you're trying to avoid. And that often gets in the way of our boundaries because we're afraid of an outcome happening. So when I let people love me, when I let people love me, and think of your past. They leave me, they hurt me, they love me, right? That could be a possible one. They take advantage of me, yeah. And so it makes sense that you might have more rigid boundaries. They hurt me. We might get rigid boundaries because of those. They leave, so we might be the chaser. And now we flip-flop between the two. We talked about that basically how we attach to other human beings is our radar and our for safety and security of our connection to them. And so when the radar is going off and saying it's unsafe, or that they might leave, then we get anxious. And so it really affects how we show up in relationships, because it's shown in the research that how we attach to our parent, usually our mom, before we're two, relates to how we attach as adults to other people. And the beautiful thing about that is we can change it always. We can learn to create secure attachments. Now, the real big thing there, and the definition of a secure attachment, much like healthy boundaries, is my partner's needs matter as much as my own, but my own needs matter as much as my partner's. And that's a rare thing. So because the person passed away, I feel like I have to hang on to others. Anxious. Yeah, it's anxious attachment. And it can happen that we have a hard time letting people in. So we'll constantly hit the same level of relationship with people, and then the relationship will end, or we'll create conflict, or we'll pick people who we never really will let in because they're too painful to be with. But we stay with them because we know that we won't have to go to the place where we've been painfully scarred beyond that. And so this is what we're learning about. It's about mother or father. Teresa, our attachment style is usually with mom because it's our primary attachment. And having over availability is still not a boundary. If our parent was too available, there's no boundary. So we're meshed, we're allowed to do anything. We can connect with them, but no empathy. So you have access to them, but there's no love there. So that can really cause, start to mess with the mind. And then it's like, I'll choose people who are detached because that's what I know to be true. Okay, so man, we're rolling, guys, we're rolling. So I want you to know that the body doesn't lie, that conflict in our body is quite powerful. And we know that from, I talked to you about inflammation from loneliness, and I'll just stop sharing those results. We know that from inflammation from loneliness. We know that from in the studies where John Gottman, who's a relationship researcher, he saw that if he just observed a couple that was talking about life, about their relationships, he saw that if they had high levels of conflict in their relationship, their body was acting like it was beside a tiger. Because again, evolutionarily, our bodies don't know the difference between a stressful job, a stressful life, a stressful relationship, a stressful home, and a tiger. We are wired to go into fight, flight, freeze. And when we go into fight, flight, freeze, our inflammation goes up, our cortisol goes up. And that inflammatory states are hard on the body. And now if you think about how that ends up being to your gut, because your gut is not like, hey, there's a tiger, we should digest this burger, right? The blood flow in your body goes to your extremities. And when we go to these extremities, it's trying to get us out of there. Our vision narrows, we go to tunnel vision, and we get into threat, right? Freeze, but we're like looking for an escape, and we're also closing down. And so that's why if we're in these high stress states, we need to learn how to create and calm our nervous system. We need to learn how to bring peace to ourselves, which is by creating boundaries around ourselves, by what we need. Now, I want you to understand that we are framed and wired to react to the world. And what I mean by that is we become who we need to be loved, right? We become who we need to be in order to be loved by the people around us and accepted by them, to fit in, to keep the peace, to fit in the family, our religions, cultures, societies, groups of friends, colleagues, whatever. And we adapt, and we're malleable, and we're in these romantic relationships too. And so till we become aware of it, right, we abandon ourselves. We have this sort of true self, who's our true essence, which is what we truly love. And then we have who we've been. And I think about it like this, and you have to remember that almost everyone does this. We're in this new time. where we have this awareness and this ability to choose. And like, we don't get to choose our family that we're born into, technically, although, you know, although there's some existential belief that we do choose our family, and either belief is fine. We don't choose our family and we do choose them. Either way, they have a purpose, you know, for us to grow and evolve and to learn something, to learn gifts, to learn wisdom, to give to other people, to teach former versions of ourselves. And so we have to see that we don't get to choose our family, or we do, but you get to choose your family now. You get to choose who you want to surround yourself with. You get to choose how you want people to behave in your life, in the world you construct, and the family you're creating or have already created. And so we have to see that, and I think someone asked me to repeat that we actually have to be at the space where we become who we need to be in order to fit in order to be part of the family, in order to not make mom or dad mad, in order to get their approval. We go do this program at university, go to this university, don't go to university because you'll be shamed. Don't be wealthy because wealthy people are bad. All these different fucking messages, right? And all of them say like, oh, it's more important that I get love from them than I be me and love myself. And so this is what the work is. The work that we're doing on this call today, the work that you're invited to do in life, the work I was invited to do at 27 was rejoining your true self. This is who you're being. This is who you are. And we're usually a couple choices and expressions to getting here. And as Kim said, relationships are our greatest teacher. Yes, because everything we're bad at will be magnified by relationship. Everything. And that's why our partners are an opportunity always to learn. Whenever I get triggered by anyone, I get curious now. I look at what is my belief regarding it? Why am I upset? What is it challenging in me? What do I need to learn? You know, my friend Louis Alaro once said that always be open to the idea that one of the 5 core pillars that you base your identity on is dead wrong. Always be open to the fact that you're wrong, or that you don't know, or that you need to learn. And when you do that, you're open to the world. Someone might say something you don't agree with, but you're open to it. And you look like, oh, is there truth in that? Is there opportunity in that? So this is the chance, guys, to wake up, to rise, to be, all of that stuff. And I think, like, you know, this is how it begins. We got to let our world hear our roar, as so to speak, whatever that means for you. And so we need I think you can pick more than one. I'm not really positive. I think so. I love the just give me a minute. I'm a thinker. I know some people are like, okay, slow your roll, buddy. Like, relax. Emily, can you put that question for the end? And I will, I'll answer it at the end, because it's a great question and other people want to hear it. All right, so we got 66, 67. I'm going to close it in 10 seconds. The other people are just chilling, having coffee, probably on another call. Okay. F yes, I like that. I'm ready to rock Earth. I feel powerful. I like the 12 people who are like, yeah, let's just calm down here, buddy. You're a really excitable person. That is true. I'm get really excited about this shit. It makes me super pumped, because I know that we're all capable of this. We're all capable of being exceedingly happy and powerful. Okay. So here's the shift, right? So it goes from I need you and other people. I need you to need me. And then it goes to, right, we get to this rejection space where we go, I don't need you or anyone. I'm fine. I can do it all on my own. I don't need anybody. People just start, you know, like we get to this like independent, whatever you want to call it. And that's been for sure a movement, which is great. And it doesn't allow access to our hearts. And I love this thought that relationship is through you, I find me. Through you, I become my highest self, my best self. I find God, I find spirit, I find the universe, I find my purpose. You know, like ultimately we want to learn how to cultivate relationships that invite each other's growth. In my relationship, I don't want my partner to tell me that I'm always great, and she's great at not telling me that when I need to grow. I invite that. We're in this space where we invite feedback, and that's a culture we've had to create, where it says like, I'm open to you pointing to the things I can't see. That's why relationships are so brilliant, because they shine the spotlight on the things we're not so good at. So here's a check-in. I heard this once from my friend Kelsey Grant, that you can be committed to your dreams or your excuses, but you can't be committed to both. That you can have what you want, or you can have what you don't want, but you can't have both. You have to choose what you move into, what you're ready for, what you want. You have to choose to go towards that. And so all the feelings, right? We're going to talk a little bit about emotions. And I want you to understand that feelings are information. Feelings are just that. They're just like these pieces of information that are coming in. And we have to start to separate ourselves from feelings and thoughts, and knowing your brain, as I showed you that computer before, your brain is a computer, and it's your fucking computer. It's not someone else's. You are not your computer. You're in charge of your computer. You're in charge of what you want to create. You're in charge of how you want to feel. And you're in charge of what you do with feelings. Feelings are information. We code them as good or bad, right? We code them as good or bad. And humans are negatively biased. So if I talk to you about someone you don't know, and I give you both good information and bad information around them, you will bias towards bad, not neutral. And like the registration of pain we experience from the thought of loss of a certain amount of money is greater than this joy we'll experience from gaining that money and winning it. Isn't that crazy? And so here's the new rules to feelings. So we hadn't got this, and people were referring to some thoughts about feelings. I have the right to my feelings. So someone said, well, I feel bad. I'm worried about them. I have the right to my feelings. I do not have to defend them. All my feelings are okay, even anger and painful ones. And there is a difference between anger and aggression. Anger can be clean. I could tell you to go fuck yourself, and that's aggression. Or I could say, how you're being right now is not okay, and I'm hurting. You know, and that's the same thing being communicated, but one is connective and one is disconnective. No one can tell me what I should feel, including myself. You do not get to tell what you get to feel. We have to get into this space of self-acceptance. I talked about denial before. I should not feel this way, but you do. So you either accept it and learn from the information that's coming in, or you deny it and then you have to detach from who you are. What I'm feeling will pass. Always true. Always true. My feelings, I mean, my breakup in grade 9, I thought I was going to die. Thank God Adele wasn't around then. I would have been toast. I was listening to Boyz II Men, though. That shit was hard. Okay. So my feelings have value and intelligence, right? They're information. And allowing myself to feel and share my emotions is healthy. These are the principles that we need to live by. These are the principles that we get to live by. You know, this is how we get to exist. I was recently listening to a talk on relationships, and the lady, in reference to boundaries, said, just think about a dog versus a cat. A dog usually is a mesh and has horrible boundaries. They follow you around. They want to do everything you want to do. And a cat is like, yeah, I'll hang with you for a sec, but then I'll go to the other end of the couch because I'm tired of being pet. Like a cat tends to have sort of like rigid boundaries, as where a dog has really hardly any boundaries. We'll call them healthy, but you know, it's just showing you that the difference of, you can really see the difference in different animals too. It's a great way to see it. Kate, can you put that in the Q&A so I can answer it after? So really what we're building is emotional intelligence. We're thinking like, okay, I need to recognize and understand and manage my emotions. And I need to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of you. I need to begin to see through my own lens of how I see the world, but I also need to understand that there are other lenses and there are other ways of being, and everyone has the right to their way of being. You know, again, we don't get to tell someone else that they don't feel the way they feel or that we didn't hurt them. And just like no one gets to do it to us. So a good way to begin to learn how to separate ourselves from feelings is we usually say something like, I am angry. You know, and as soon as you say I am, you always have to become whatever you say I am. Whatever comes after I am, you have to become. So if you say I am angry, you cannot at the exact same time say I'm not angry, because I am is a state, it's a being. But if you go to I feel angry, now it's a feeling. So notice how we're beginning to think about how we think. So we go, I am angry to I feel angry. And now we're separated from it. This is us observing, I feel angry. But then if we go to another part, we go, a part of me feels angry. So now we have a part of us that feels angry. And we might have another part of us that feels excited. We have another part of us that feels hurt. Another part of us that feels disappointed. That dreadful word, right? Disappointed. And so we begin to see that we can have different parts of us feeling different ways, and we start to separate ourselves from our feelings. So our feelings start to become information. And we have to remember that the words we use to communicate become our world. How we speak becomes the world we live in. And so if I say I am angry, it's very different physiologically what I'm required to do. I have to become everything associated with anger. But if I go to a part of me feels angry, it's not really as responsible. Now I'm like, oh, a part of me feels angry. That's just a part of me, but I got so many other parts. I'm still loved. I still love myself. I'm still good. I'm still motivated. I still am me, right? There's all these different aspects of it. Okay. How do you handle a situation where you express your emotions even when they are difficult and the other person attacks and accuses you of being confrontational? You can ask them, what is about your approach that's confrontational? You know, why? And we're going to learn structure of language so that confrontation is not necessarily a received thing. So we're going to talk about that. Influence feelings, what I mean by that, Megan, is that we're going to help influence them to feel more safe and connected as well. Like we're going to help by being a great communicator, by expressing our boundaries. We help influence other people to become a different way too. We invite them to be vulnerable. We invite them to expand. We invite them to grow. We invite them to open their hearts up. Okay. So here we need to start to tune into what our feelings are. So look at how many. So on the left side of this is annoyed and fearful and all these different categories, right? But look how many more words we have for negative feelings than we do for positive feelings. And this is from nonviolent communication. Again, you'll get sent all of this, guys, so you don't have to write it all down or worry that you're going to miss something. So literally, like as you look at this, we can start to expand our knowledge of what we feel. And we have to remember that we can have a do-over. So you could say something like, right now, I feel furious. And the person could be like, you're furious? And you're like, no, actually, that's not right. Right now, I feel bewildered or baffled. I haven't used the word bewildered in a long time. So we begin to connect to the feelings we have. And this is a learned practice, especially if you think about being a kid who wasn't allowed to have needs, who wasn't allowed to have your own self. So this is a practice to learn how to build boundaries. It's practice. It's all practice, just like life, right? So here's an exercise. So I want everyone to close their eyes. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to put your hand on your heart. And I want you to breathe in. I'm doing it too. I want you to breathe in for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I want you to breathe out for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I want you to keep taking deep breaths. And I want you to keep your hand over your heart. I remember when I was going through a breakup, keep those deep breaths in your hand and your heart. A yoga instructor said, you know, when you're a kid and you hurt your knee, the first thing you do is put your hand on your knee because hands are healing. And so you can feel the warmth from your hand, or sometimes mine get cold and clammy, but you can feel it. You can feel the safeness of your own hand. And I want you to take this moment just to check in with yourself. What are you thinking, right? What thoughts are happening? Are you getting all this information and you're feeling a little overwhelmed? Just feel into that. Are you excited? Are you anxious? Feel. And then look in your body. Start to code in your body where that is. Remember that thoughts are like clouds. They go in and out. feelings, again, information. So the practice of meditation, however you want to do it, you can do it walking, keep breathing. You can do it anyway. You could take time hiking. You can do it at coffee by yourself in the morning. It allows us to begin to observe our thoughts. We start to create space between the moments because we create space in our mind, in our computer. We delete the programs that aren't serving us. And as we do that, we create between stimulus and response where there's choice. We now have observation and expansion. And so we have to remember that thoughts also create feelings. If I think, I'm going to lose this person, I'm going to feel a certain way. And so we have to start to become the curator of our thoughts. So if we have a thought that is dragging us down, we can choose a better thought. And that takes practice. It takes practice to code our brain to start to think positively because we literally are coded to look for negative. Remember that. That's how we're evolved. And so we are in this beautiful opportunity in this time on this planet, on this call, that we can learn how to be different, that we can learn how to change who we are, change how we think. We are not destined to a life because of the past. We're always capable of changing. You don't quit smoking in 2 years, you quit it the day you decide to. And today, let's decide to. So I want you to think about the feelings that you were looking forward to. And I want you to think about the life that you wanted to be remembered for. And I want you to come back, be present. And I want you to just express in the chat box, how do you feel? How do you feel? I can tell you, I feel at peace. I feel excited. I feel like I can't believe I just did a meditation on a webinar. That's awesome. Overwhelmed. Yeah, I get that. Restored. And you're getting aligned. Hopeful. Like I need to delete people. Yeah, man, the delete button gets busy sometimes. Centered, grateful. That I can do whatever I set my mind to. That's so beautiful. Calm. Isn't the hand over the heart? It's just so powerful. When I was going through that breakup, that was exactly what I needed. It was like, I'm my own healer. I realized that I felt disconnected from myself and my partner. Yeah, in oscillation between anxious and excitement, Dave, I like that. Yeah, it's a beautiful opportunity. Like as I was studying a lot for this webinar, I realized that I had crossed some emotional boundaries with my partner. And I took the time to say, hey, I just had this observation and I wanted you to know what I observed. And I'm sorry. And I'm sorry for crossing that. And I want to move forward in a way where you don't feel that boundary crossing. She's like, I didn't even know that you did. Yeah, thanks. It was this really beautiful moment of connection and it cleared the space between us. We need to heal our fouls. I love this, guys. Okay, so reparenting. This is essentially what we're doing, is we're learning how to parent ourselves. In the research on couples, we know that great couples have this ability for their own self-soothing, that they're able to soothe their own emotions, which again is actually quite a big skill. So let me tell you, it can be learned because I was not a good self-soother before. I would shut down, I get defensive, all these different things. But the more you meditate or just learn that observation of self, stay in your space without distractions, without your phone, without these things, what you start to do is you start to become present to who you are. The more you do what you love, you start to become present to who you are. The more you communicate your feelings, you start to become present to who you are. And so it is this constant practice and learning how to build emotional resiliency to be in a moment where, because there's a saying that a quiet mind is one that's been listened to. And I love that because when I first started meditating, I couldn't do 5 minutes. And now, I could do 40 minutes, no problem. So it is being able to begin to observe the thoughts and not to judge them, and the feelings and not judge them, and just start to actually pay attention to them. So Here's an exercise. So I want you to grab your pen and I want you to think, how did your parents handle conflict? What messages were you sent about emotions? And I'll launch a poll so you can have some examples after, but write down, how did your parents handle conflict? What messages were you sent about feelings? Could you have them? You know, some people said that their parent was cold and although available, unavailable. So just start to take the time to just think about it. Now, an important part of this is, you know, someone else was talking about their family invalidating, you know, like you didn't feel that way. So I want you to think about it from the eyes of a child. When you were young, how did you feel about it? Because often as adults, we'll be like, well, dad or mom wasn't around, but it's because they worked hard to take care of the family. But the truth is, dad wasn't around. You know, so we invalidate our experience. It's no judgment on dad, it's just the truth. And maybe we felt disconnected from mom or dad because they weren't around. We felt not important. But we have to learn to create trust and validation and not deny ourselves and how we feel. Badly, my parents handled them badly. Yeah, a lot of parents handled them badly. They're human. Good God, my parents yelled at each other all the time. Probably why I tend to turtle in the eyes of conflict. Yes. You know, a really powerful shift is to start seeing your parents as the children of parents. And you start to see how they were. You start to observe them as the children of other people who had horrible patterns sometimes. You know, mom blew up and became melodramatic and pushed us away and just shut down behind a book. Dad chased after her and made sure we were okay. Yeah, so, you know, these patterns, I'm going to show you how these patterns match up because we talked about it. So here's the poll, just because people are writing a lot. So conflict, no one thought. All we had was conflict. Emotions were shared at high volume. We didn't hug or say, I love you. You could pick more than one. When my parents fought, one would explode and then the other would chase. Sorry, that one isn't full there. And the other would chase. My mom would shut down or dad would shut down. My mom and dad would confide in me a lot, which again is that enmeshment, right? My parents handled it badly and I took the role of mediator. Yeah, that's taking on the role of the adult. That's not your responsibility. I used to do the same. I had one parent at either end of the spectrum. Yeah, parents talked to each other calmly, but told me what to say and feel. Wow. Everything had to be appropriate. Very much had to create what was accepted. Yeah. Violence. I saw one there. Was it they got divorced? Violence, drug abuse, police, mean, cruel behavior. My heart goes to you all because these are all tough experiences. And I appreciate us all being in this trust tree where we get to talk about it, where we get to experience it. And so here's the results. Mom and dad was shut down. So that is a very common, I'm going to go through what that's from and how to fix it, how to resolve it. It's not broken, but how to do better behaviors. When my parents fought, one would explode and the other would leave. We didn't hug. So look at those. So that is such a pattern, the explosion and the leaving. And so we're going to talk about that. Okay. So here we go. So we have to begin, what we get to do is begin to change our perspective about criticisms, frustrations, complaints. So whenever we have a criticism about someone, we have a desired behavior that's the opposite. So we might say to someone like, you never take out the garbage. But our desired behavior is, it would be really beautiful and helpful if you took out the garbage, which is a much different way of getting the garbage taken out than, but not putting conditions like I would love you if, but it would be really helpful and I'd be grateful if, you know, you did that. And so behind every criticism and complaint is an unmet emotional need. So it's an unmet emotional need, like safety, understanding, to be a priority, to feel connected. I'm going to go through needs after, but behind every criticism and complaint is an unmet emotional need. So when you feel like you're criticizing or complaining, we need to start in the space between what's happening and what we're choosing to do is a gap. And in that gap, the more we learn mindfulness, we can start to say, what is my desired behavior? What do I need from them? And what is my emotional need? I need them to take out the garbage or to put the toilet seat down or to do whatever. But my emotional need is there too. It's at the basis of it. Support, understanding, priority, connected, loved, unconditionally loved, all those different things. And we're going to get to more needs, so don't worry. So identifying the pattern. So we usually have these patterns of communication. So a good way to find it is finishing these sentences. The more I blank, the more you blank, the more you blank, the more I blank. So we might think of the parents who had the attack and the withdrawal. The more you attack, the more I distance, the more you attack, the more I distance, right? So they all require each other, and we have to start seeing that we're always part of the pattern. It doesn't matter where it started or who started it, everyone fuels the dance. Everyone fuels the dance. And when we can begin to take responsibility for our side, as Byron Katie says, which she has a beautiful book called Loving What Is, she says, you cannot have war with one person. You can't have war with one person. The moment you lay down your arms, there's no war anymore. You know, and that could be challenging for people in these cycles because, you know, we talk about like criticism and then defensiveness. This cycle, this one, like you attack me, I distance. Those are usually hand in hand. You're criticizing me, I withdraw. And so the more someone withdraws, the more we get upset, just like someone saying there, Sylvia, shut down, the more he yells. The more I shut down, the more he yells, right? So there's a cycle. It's called a vulnerability cycle. And what is powerful and what happens though, is when a couple's so ingrained, especially over years, then when one person disrupts that cycle, the other person doesn't know what to do because it's how we handle conflict and communication. So they'll often be like, if you do a kind gesture, they're like, you don't mean it, or you're only doing it because I asked, right? We totally invalidate the other person trying to connect to us in a different way. And then the cycle continues. So we have to learn different ways of catching ourselves before we get to this space of explosion. And one of the ways is to say something like, I love us too much to continue this way right now. And that be an agreement in the couple ahead of time, that this is where we get to. Now, I'm gonna just go through some of the different walls that are there. So don't worry, I'm gonna talk more about this. So here, there's essentially four different types of walls. There's walls that are based in anger, there's fear-based, there's silence, and there's words. So the anger one is we're giving off the message, verbally or non-verbally, that if you come near me or say anything, I'll explode. I might yell at you, so watch out. And others get afraid to approach us because of fear of triggering our anger. Now the other one is fear. So people who use fear as a wall, they often retreat from others to keep safe. These people don't tend to go to parties, they don't hang around after a meeting to chat. It emits an energy or a field of don't come near me or I'll fall apart. I'm so fragile and afraid that I can't handle contact with people. It's not really an effective form of protection, right? Because it's timid and it gives off the energy that I'm scared. And whenever it gives off that energy, people who are dominant will be attracted to that, and we attract that. Silence, we become quiet, we don't emit any energy of emotion. And it's different than people who use fear and anger. We sort of fade, we become invisible, and we start to observe what's happening instead of participating in what's happening. So words. So we talk right on, and even when someone tries to contribute to the conversation by making a comment, we'll change the subject and we'll keep talking. So the wall is that we are the ones in charge of the conversation. So, we have to see that when there's a dysfunctional boundary system, we usually move between no boundaries and walls. So that would be similar to like porous and then rigid, right? And it's common to move from one wall to another. Like silence begets anger, words begets anger. Anger is often a secondary emotion. So here we go. So here's the different types of reactions. So, can I repeat the part about dominance and being attracted to it? Well, often if we have this energy, here I'm just going to go back to here so you guys don't get caught reading that slide and not listening. So often what happens is when we have it, you can think about it like if we are in school and, you know, like a kid is bullied at school. If you take that kid and you move them to another school, they'll often still get bullied because they haven't changed the underlying energy and the way they communicate. Their body language and the way they verbalize is a victim energy. It's a victim, and it's not to say it's their fault. It's just that they haven't learned how to cultivate a sense of self-worth, of strength. And the bully is drawn to that through their own insecurities because they look for someone who will put up with their bullshit, right? They're still coming from a space of insecurity too. What about people pushing people away to anger for a reaction? Is that anger? It is, in a sense, when we push people away with anger. I'm going to get to sort of the resolution of that. So just look at here. I'll go to the type of reactions. So in John Gottman's research, he saw that there were 4 things. When he studied couples, he still studies them. He's a genius. He sees that there's 4 things that are prevalent in all relationships that end in divorce: criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. So criticism is starting statements with you always, you never. Starting statements with you. So someone was saying that their daughter says she feels criticized all the time. If you start to be mindful of the way, and I'm going to teach us how to structure language, so patience. If we start to structure with I feel, we start to take ownership of ourselves, then we remove the opportunity for defensiveness, because as soon as someone hears you, their self-worth is feeling criticized. So that's why criticism and defensiveness go hand in hand, and criticism and stonewalling. So defensiveness is this reaction, right? This reaction to. Now, it's because our self-worth is feeling questioned, feeling, you know, usually if we are afraid of not feeling like we're enough, feeling like we're going to be rejected or abandoned, that will spark all of these, and defensiveness is our angry reaction. Now the healing of defensiveness, because I have been a master at this one, it takes a big pill to swallow on this one, is saying, I can see some truth in that. It's taking responsibility for our role. And so I know that I had to like start healing that. I asked the people in my life who I was close to call me out on when I got defensive. And then I would say, I could see some truth in that. Because I had to start to take responsibility for how I was being received. And the thing is, to be great at communicating in a relationship, it requires humility. It requires saying like, I'm not so good at some things. It requires constantly being the student. It requires being okay with knowing we're not so great at some things. Now, often the criticism is rude and over the top. Angie, that's the idea. These are not healthy behaviors, and we have all probably exhibited all of them. And now when John Gottman observes relationships, he sees that he could predict with over 93 or 94% accuracy if people will divorce if he listens to 20 hours of their conversation. If he listens to just 3 minutes of a couple's conversation, he could predict with over 80% accuracy if they'll divorce. So that shows you how important our words are. Now, Angie, the difference between criticism being rude and over the top, when it's structured in a way that gives feedback, then it's feedback. When you say, hey, right now I feel this way, and it's constructed in a safe way, it's feedback. That's different. So his name is John Gottman. I'm going to send you guys the 4 horsemen, these 4 things. I'm going to send you the antidotes to them. You just relax. So stonewalling is another one, and that is withdrawing. That's putting up a wall. That's hanging up the phone. That's not being available. That's leaving the house. Now, that's because we tend to feel really flooded. We tend to feel overwhelmed. And there is times that we actually need space, right? We actually need space between what is happening. We need to process it so we can not become hurtful to someone else. We know we're worried about how we're going to be. And so we need to learn, the antidote to this is eventually to learn how to stay. But here's how you learn it. Here's how you train your nervous system, because that's important, right? If someone's criticizing or giving you feedback, we could still stonewall, even if it's feedback. We could shut down because our worth is feeling questioned and we're feeling hurt, and we're feeling overwhelmed. So what we need to learn how to do is to say, I'm not okay right now to continue this conversation, and I just need some time in order to process this. I will come back to you in this amount of time. And so it's on us to come back, because what happens to the person who's often critical or like anxious or giving the feedback and wanting to have a conversation is their fear is withdrawal, right? That's the enmeshment. I'm afraid I'm going to lose you. I'm afraid you're going to leave. And so the leaving, the stonewalling, triggers exactly what they're overwhelmed by. And the person who stonewalls or gets defensive, their trigger is being overwhelmed and smothered because they had a parent like that. And so what happens is we need to build trust by saying, I need some time to process this, but I'll come back to you. And it's up to us to come back to them. That's the key. And over time, we'll learn how to stay longer. Over time, we'll learn how to calm our nervous system. And the last one is contempt. So contempt is things like eye rolling, sarcasm. And so contempt is very hierarchical in that it says, I'm here, you're here. Eye rolling is the most predictive behavior of divorce. And I've even had people eye roll at that statement, right? So like eye rolling is powerful because it says like, I don't respect you. I don't believe what you're saying. I'm here, you're a child. And so the healing of that usually requires therapy coaching because we need to realign the structure of the relationship, the hierarchy of the relationship. So we're both on the same plane. And the moment we go, he or she is broken and I'm already fixed, or I'm growing and they're not, we've created a hierarchy. We're not even letting them reach us because there is a protective mechanism around it. It doesn't mean those aren't untrue, that they're not necessarily leaning into growth or they're not doing their work. It just means that we're not even allowing them access. We're creating a hierarchy in the relationship. And you see that a lot when people make like a face of disgust when their partner says something. So triggers are everywhere, right? Like they're everywhere. And like it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to be a monk on a mountain and to sit by the ocean and to like explore mindfulness and put your hand on your heart. But it also, it's a lot harder to do that in the middle of New York City, right? So it's easy to talk about mindfulness and communication when we're not around. But when we're actually in the midst of feeling like we're going to be hurt and rejected, that's when the skills need to become cultivated, which can happen over time. I promise you that. And the one thing I wanted to mention is when people go into these states, these walls, or these types of reactions, a great question to ask is to say, I see you're hurting right now, and whatever their choice of behavior is. And I just really want to understand what you're trying to protect yourself from. What are you trying to protect yourself from? And so, okay, so getting to triggers. So triggers are everywhere. And I want you to find your core trigger. What is the one thing that tends to be your greatest sensitivity? And so that is a fairly easy thing to figure out, which I mean, right? Isn't that nice that it's easy? So I want you to grab your pen and your paper, and you can do this in the chat box too. Okay, hold on one sec. I'll come back to sarcasm. So I want you to do this question. So what I wanted most as a child and didn't get was? What I wanted most as a child and didn't get was? So go back to being a child. So through the eyes of a child. And for most of us, it will be things like understanding, freedom to be myself, love, safety, unconditional love, presence, to feel heard. And here I'll just launch this poll, and it can be more than one thing. Emotional communication, acceptance, yeah, attention, support. All right, keep them rolling in. All right, I'll give it 10 more seconds. Keep them coming. Oh, you can only pick one? Okay, well, pick your favorite one. or your least favorite, I guess, depending on how you look at it. Okay, so here's the poll. So look at this. Presence. I mean, pretty close to unconditional love, and to feel heard and freedom to be myself. So I want you to understand something that's pretty clear from this poll. Presence. We all have smartphones, and we are all often not present with the people around us. We often have really poor boundaries with technology. And when we're around other people, we're often not present. And we have to think about, and I've had to do this too, be very observant of when I'm being pulled to my phone, when I'm feeling vulnerable, or when I'm feeling, and it's usually an escape, because our phones, because they're so connected just to Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all these different things, Snapchat, they are dopamine hits. We are going in there and getting drugs that fuel. I'm loved, I'm enough, I'm fuel, and you know, I often think, like, if you removed your social media, who would you be? How would you feel? You know, like, I had to learn a long time ago to not place my self-worth in how a post performs or what people think about what I write, because often some people don't like what I write, or they don't like my opinion. So we want presence, and everything we want here, we have to start to see we need to provide for other people, you know? And so the answer to this question is very powerful, because this is a mind-blowing experience when I first learned this, and some of you have probably done courses with me before. So what I wanted most as a child and didn't get will be often the thing that our partner doesn't give to us. So this is the match, right? You're the peanut butter to my jelly. The very thing we wanted most will be the thing that our partner does not give to us. So we will wound them in the thing they wanted the most, we won't give to them. So if we're anxious and overwhelming, they likely needed space and understanding. And if they're withdrawn, we likely needed someone who was present. Now the opposite can happen. In, like, if we had a parent who was overwhelming and controlling, we might pick a partner who's not present, who's unavailable. You know, so we might go to the other end. And yes, this is related to friendships as well. I want you to think about the people who frustrate you the most. They will usually be this greatest trigger. And when you start to learn about your kids, you'll start to see that we pass the wounding down until we learn how to heal it. Now, pay attention here, because this is important. We usually spend our whole lives trying to heal this through other people. We pick our partners because we're seeking to heal the thing we didn't get, to heal the presence, to heal the overwhelm, to heal whatever it is, to need understanding, to presence, understanding, love, all these things. We're seeking it from them because we've been trained to find love outside of ourselves. But the healing of this is giving the very thing we always wanted to ourselves. It's always giving it to ourselves first. Because when we give it to ourselves first, we take the responsibility off our partner. And when we take the responsibility off our partner to need to heal us, they're the mirror that shows us what we don't love sometimes, the behaviors that hurt us, but the mirror that says you have some stuff to heal. And as you heal yours, you can heal theirs. And this is the learning. This is the learning. This is why love is so powerful. This is why relationships are so powerful. And this is how patterns stop. And this is why it's so that beautiful moment where you get to and you say, it's not your job to make me happy anymore. I do that. Now you can just love me. Now you can just take care of me and take care of yourself, right? So boundaries are fully a form of self-love. Boundaries are fully a form of self-love, because you can't love yourself if you don't have an identity, if you don't have your own needs. And so that's why we need to learn how to cultivate it. And so let's drop the motherfucking mic, right? Let's do this. You know, let's get this done. Let's figure out how to drop some boundaries. So this is the practical part of the experience. So I'm going to teach you some skills. I'm going to teach you about it. I mean, we've already learned some skills. And I want you also, you know, because we're on this call, we're in this state, and we're learning a lot of stuff. And it is so important that we have compassion for ourselves, for what we didn't know till we know. And so often what we do, and I used to do this all the time, and I have to be mindful of it, is I'll learn something that I'm doing poorly. And then I will feel the shame and guilt for all the times I did that thing. But the transition from that is offering compassion for the former version of yourself that didn't know. Because you know now. And often we shame the former version of ourselves. Is like, I can't believe you didn't know. Like, why did you do that? Why did you hurt this? Why did you have poor boundaries? Why do you let yourself get walked on? Why do you da-da-da-da? We get into the critic. And the space is compassion. It's, I can't believe I didn't know what I know today. And I have so much love from the old parts of me that taught me this today. Because without those lessons, you wouldn't be here in this moment knowing this. Okay? So yeah, in the current version, loving the current version of ourselves. Good point, Chris. Okay. So we're gonna drop the mic. So you have needs, we all have needs, and our needs are baseline needs. If you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, we get to self-actualization the more we move up the triangle. So we need food, we need clothing, we need shelter, we need physical nurturing, we need emotional nurturing, and we need guidance. Those are all things that we need, you know, and we need to start to distinguish between a need and a want. So we know that, as I said, the dependency needs are we need to have those needs met so we can move up the ladder. And so we need security. And it often seems like wants are less important than needs, but they're actually really important. We have to think about what brings us joy. What, you know, are we moving towards? What's our purpose? You know, those are what we want to achieve. And we talked about that early. Our big wants are things, you know, that provide us with our life with direction and fulfillment. I want to be a doctor. I want to have kids. I want to get married to this person. Small wants are things like our preferences. They could be like, we don't need to have them, but when we choose them, they bring us great joy. Like, I love coffee. I want coffee. It might be a big want, actually. And so we could be, these are the different sections of how we can acknowledge and meet our needs. We could be too dependent. Like, I know I have needs, but I don't acknowledge or take care of them. I know what I want, but I expect others to meet my needs. And then we're anti-dependent, which is, I know I have needs, but I do not or cannot ask for help. I know what I want, but do not or cannot ask for help, right? Like, we're so independent that we're totally isolated. And then there's needless or wantless. I'm unaware I have needs. I don't know what I want. And so that could be from the experience of being an adult child, taking care of the family when you're really young. I mean, there's like 5-year-olds who have to cook their own meals, right? So, you know, how would they know how to have their own needs and wants because they're in survival mode their whole life? So we often confuse needs with wants. So I take care of my needs, which I'm unaware of, by getting what I want, which I can recognize. So I can want a car to create security. And we often see this actually in relationship where someone's heart is broken or someone violated the relationship in some way and they buy them a present. So they satisfy the want, but not satisfying their need. So that's the other side, confusing wants with needs. I get wants met in an attempt to meet needs. So I want security, the car's a security. I want to get engaged, but there's total lack of security in the relationship. So I'll use the engagement, the want, to satisfy a security need. Or I'll have a kid to satisfy a security need because now I have them locked down. Doesn't actually work, by the way. And it's no child's job to keep a family together. It's not a child's job, and that's not fair. And then healthy needs and wants. I acknowledge and meet my needs. I acknowledge and meet my wants. And we have to really start to think about what are the beliefs that we acquired from having wants and needs from our parents, from our mom or dad, from previous partners, from society, and how this affected the ability to acknowledge and honor our needs, right? Like, think about, like, we're told to not want too much. We're told to, like, not seek wealth. We're told to, like, all of these different things. Okay, so this is an understanding that I explained earlier. We choose what we believe we're worthy of. And let's commit to being worthy of awesomeness, of amazingly connected relationships. And when we start to believe we're worthy of something, we have to start to choose what supports that, right? So I can't say I'm worthy of a great relationship and stay in one that hurts or not invited to change. So I either have to change my belief, I'm worthy of a great relationship, has to shift to I'm not worthy of a great relationship, or we maintain the belief by getting rid of or changing the relationship. So we will always choose what we believe, and we will begin to believe what we choose. So there's symbiotic. So that's why I was saying, when we create amazing boundaries, we start to believe we're worthy of boundaries. Self-love, self-worth, identity, us, ourselves, right? So this is why the work is constantly moving. Boundaries are flexible, they can move, and they can change. And as we learn more about ourselves, like let's say we've had trust broken in our past, we can invite what we need in order to trust again, and that could change. Like, I need to access to all your social media accounts and blah, 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 blah. And that can change as we build trust over time. Okay, so it's time for an audit. Okay, so grab your pen and paper, and I want you to write down, who are you mad at? Not in the chat box, but in your own piece of paper. Who gives you anxiety? Who are you frustrated with? Who are you blaming your problems and your feelings on? Who do you resent? Who do you avoid? Who can't you be yourself around? So I want you to write that down. Just go through that list. Who, and an easy way to do this without all of those is, who do you feel tension with? Who do you feel a lack of clarity and space with, and free flowing love and just free flowing? And sometimes it's hard to come up with these because we haven't given ourselves permission to feel, to have needs, to be hurt. And so it's a really beautiful opportunity to step into yourself, to begin to feel, the hand over heart. Okay, who do I feel tension with? I feel a bit of tension with myself. I need to have boundaries. Yes, it can be the same person for all of these. This is multiple people, right? This could be people at work. This could be partner. This could be friends. It's all of them. We just want to make an accurate audit of what that is. Megan, can I answer all future and past men in relationships? If you answer all future, then you're creating a future that you likely don't want. So I wouldn't encourage that, because your words really matter. And are you going to speak hope into yourself, or are you going to speak a lack of hope? We don't want to recreate a different future. That's why we're here today. Sorry, we don't want to recreate the same future. That's why we're here today. Will I get a recording? Yes, everyone will get a recording. I feel like I wrote that everywhere, but it was maybe hard to see. It can be the same person. Before your talk, my answer would have been me to all these questions. Yeah, and you know what? I had a lot of frustration with myself when I was learning boundaries, because I wasn't taking responsibility for myself. I wasn't speaking to them. So, I wasn't speaking my truth. You have to start to see that wherever you hold resentment, frustration, anger, is usually because it's a mirror of us not prioritizing ourselves. So whoever you resent, whoever you're mad at, whoever you're upset with, whoever you avoid, whoever you can't be yourself around, it's a great mirror that you're not standing in your truth, that you have a lack of boundaries because there's not emotional safety around them. And then we project it onto them. It's their fault that we don't feel good. And that's bullshit. It's ours. I have a lot of trouble answering any of these. I can't decide if it's because I've worked through it and moved on, or it's because I just brushed things aside. Stephanie, that question is beautiful because it just invites. And later on, you can meditate on it. You could be like, what is true? And you can just trust that your body will tell you. And you can start to see, have you invalidated a lot of feelings, or have you let it go? Do you allow yourself to experience anger and grief? Because a lot of us don't, because they're not safe feelings if we didn't experience them as a child, or they were explosive as a kid. Okay, so we have the audit. So we have the list of people. And this is a process from Alexandra Solomon, who has a beautiful book called Loving Bravely. I'll send you guys the link to all of this. So she calls it name. So name, connect, choose. So we name what is happening. What's the situation? And then we connect to it. How do we feel about it? We put the hand on the heart and we're like, okay, how am I feeling? And then what do I do with my feelings? How do I want to love today? What's my new story? And so name is saying, tell your story, identify and declare something as your truth, or your experience. Remember, you don't have to worry about what their truth is. This is learning how to express yours. And the power in naming it comes from bringing what's buried, like out of our awareness, into the light for examination. So it's sort of being like, as she states, like an archaeologist. We're like, this is my hammer. We're like, hey, let me just look at this thing and just look at it for what it is. And often we could be like, well, when I was growing up, Dad was gone because he worked a lot, right? I said that example earlier, so let's use it again. So if we named it, we would just say, Dad worked a lot and he wasn't around. That's it. There's no judgment, there's no thought, there's no invalidation, it's just a fact. And then we connect to it. So we attune to ourselves, we turn inward, and we check what emotions we're experiencing. What the story we're telling ourselves, the name, Dad wasn't around, what is the emotion that are attached to that story? And we want to connect to the deep truth, and it starts to bring to life the unearthed story, the needs that we have. And then we choose. And so this is where we take responsibility for how we love today. You know, a lack of awareness, you know, not doing this keeps us stuck in a loop. And as we're conscious awareness, doing this facilitates choice. We get to choose what we do with it. We get to honor and acknowledge our feelings. We get to be truthful about the story instead of denying. Okay, and so I'm just gonna walk you through that. So this is a beautiful study that was done, I believe, in Finland. And I want you to connect to the feelings you have. As we build more mindfulness and awareness and the space between stimulation and response, we start to sense when we're in the middle of a conversation and we feel flooding, a trigger, like, oh, I might be rejected. I'm feeling like this trigger. I can feel my heart rate going up, my hands sweating. What am I feeling? And so connect to the feeling you're having, as we talked about Alexandra's process. Name, connect to it, and then choose. So we're connecting. And this is all going to be sent to you, so you have access to all of this. And then the next one is, what needs are not being met in this situation? You know, like, how do you know that a boundary is being violated, and what needs are not being met? And this is, again, from Nonviolent Communication, beautiful list. And there's a bigger list, but this is a good way to start. Acceptance, appreciation, compassion, safety, shelter, sexual expression, growth, hope. So what need is not being met? So if you picked one person from your list, maybe the one that's most significant for you currently, and we would go with, what is the situation? Name what's happening. How do you feel about what's happening? And then what need isn't being met? What emotional need do you have? And then, this is ultimately what we're doing. We're thinking about how we think, right? We're not in the experience, us versus them, in the first person. We're now stepping out second and third person. We're thinking about them, we're thinking about us, and we're sort of observing both of us, non-judgmentally. And so we want to start to examine what is irrational or unhealthy thinking and beliefs that allow our boundaries to be ignored or violated. And what are some irrational thoughts or beliefs that are happening? Like, are we afraid they're going to leave even though that's not valid in the actual experience? It's not a logical experience, but remember, it's still cellular, like it's still embedded in us, an old story. But we want to observe the old story, allow it to come to the surface so we're not denying it. And then we want to look at what boundary has been violated. Is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it sexual? Is it relational? Is it situational or spiritual? Or is it many of them? So just write down on your notes which ones it is, which one or ones it is. And I'm so grateful that you guys have trusted me with this to go to these spaces. It's really an honor and a privilege, because this is such a powerful work that shifts our lives. It's amazing. Okay, so then we want to check into, who am I? What matters to me? Who do I want to become? What kind of life do I want? We talked about spiritual boundaries being core values. Like as we build an identity, that circle around it of, these are mine. So what do I stand for? Authenticity, integrity, staying true to myself, growth and expansion, fun. I'm committed to joy, and health and mental, and both mentally and emotionally. But my corest value is authenticity and integrity. It's staying true to myself and my truth, and honoring someone else's, because it's so important to me. I have to honor mine, but I also have to honor theirs separately. And so identify some new, more rational, healthy ways of thinking. I said, if you're thinking negative thoughts that cause you to feel a certain way, how do you think more positive thoughts that encourage you to change your behavior and build healthy boundaries, right, between you and other people? Change occurs in humans when we feel motivated towards what we're going to get, when we feel excited about the life we're going to create. In the research, when they say you either change or you're going to die, for heart disease patients, you either change your life or you die. 1 out of 10 change. But if you say, what are you looking forward to when you become more healthy? I'm looking forward to walks with my partner. I'm looking forward to making love. I'm looking forward to that, right? So start to really tap into, how do you want to feel? What kind of life do you want to create? And so the next step is, so we have more rational thoughts. What are better thoughts we want to think? What's a better way of thinking about this? And that frees us to be open to possibility. And then the next is, what are new behaviors that we need to add to our boundary building? What is a new behavior we need to add so that we can sustain healthy boundaries between us and other? Monogram, right? I love monogram. Okay, and then analog, yeah. So here's the fifth part. So implement the healthy boundary and beliefs and behaviors in your life so that you feel whole, so that your privacy, your rights, your whatever boundaries are being violated, they're no longer ignored or violated. Because a boundary that goes ignored, a violation of a boundary that goes ignored, it doesn't go to sleep. It's denial again, right? And it's denial. And so I think also the really big part of this is responsibility, to say what's mine? What's mine in this? And take absolute responsibility for what yours. If you want to build healthy relationships and amazing connections at work, with your family, with anyone, you have to take responsibility for what's yours. And it takes a lot of humility and vulnerability to say, that's true. Part of that is true. I can see what you're saying. You're right. But notice how connective that is, instead of, no, that's not true. You're the one who's always late. You're the one who did. And that continues the cycle. You can't have war with one person. And we don't want to deny ourselves. We don't want to reject ourselves, and we don't want to deny or reject other people. So here's a little poll, because I definitely know my answer to this. I have made others responsible for how I feel. I definitely have. That other, yeah, 1% answered no. Well done. I want you as a coach. All right, so 10 more seconds. Sweet, okay. Yeah, right, most of us. There we go, sorry, I didn't share it. So 95% of us, well done on the other people. Your responsibility machines. Okay, so here's some guidelines for effective boundary setting. So we need to back up our boundary setting with an action. What I mean by that is to choose what is the desired behavior, right? Behind every criticism is a desired behavior. I'm going to give you a structure for how to structure the language. Be direct, be firm, and be gracious. Try to step into what we could do visually is, before we go into a conversation like that, we can think about a time that we were in joy, that we were appreciative, that we were standing in our power in a kind, assertive way. And that will physiologically get us into the space when we get into the conversation, at least initially. Don't debate, defend, or over-explain. As soon as you over-explain, you're giving too much information and you're trying to justify why you have the right to have a boundary. You have a right to have a boundary. That's actually, remember, you have the right to feel how you feel, and you have the right to want what you want and need what you need. Have support easily available on the sidelines in the beginning. So like someone you can communicate with, someone you can ask advice about, a therapist, coach. Stay strong and don't give in. That is huge. Stay strong and don't give in. And how often do we say like, oh, I'm not going to have any more booty calls, or I'm not going to have any contact anymore. I'm not going to check their Instagram or their Facebook. I'm not going to communicate with an ex. I'm not going to get back together with this person who's abusive. I'm not going to be critical anymore. And then we do. So here's some situational examples of setting healthy boundaries. And again, language you'll learn. And now remember, if we're in a state of anger, often we do need to lay down some law. So remember, I'm going to show you different ways of doing it, but you may not continue to yell at me. If you do, I will leave this room and end this meeting. So in a corporate sense, we can buy time. So I have a policy of not making snap decisions. I just need some time to think and reflect on what I want to do. If you need an immediate answer, it's going to be a no. And just let it go. Just let it go. And then extra commitments. Although this is an important issue to me, I must decline your request for my help at this time, or I need to honor my family's needs. Like whatever it is that is true for you. But you can say no to things, by the way. I know, right? Money. I won't be lending you any more money. I care about you, and you need to start taking responsibility for yourself. And sometimes we have to lay down these types of boundaries. So here's some guidelines for setting consequences. Set them clearly and unemotionally. And they have to be actions you're willing to take, and you can allow for gradual change. Remember, boundaries are flexible. And it may be negotiable rather than a rigid line in the sand, right? Well, I guess a line in the sand isn't rigid. A brick wall would be a better example. So remember that you should never give a consequence that you're not willing to actually follow up with. So don't say you're ready to end a relationship or a conversation unless you actually are. And if people are unwilling to respect your boundaries, they're not true friends or people you want to spend time with. Setting personal boundaries and limits can be very important in how you lead your life, but we have to get back to the evolutionary fear and the childhood fear. If I tell these people how I need to be treated, they'll leave. And we have to start getting to the place, it's better for them to leave than to you to leave yourself, to stay with them. If you have to abandon yourself to keep anyone, you've lost. You've lost. If you have to abandon your truth and who you are to be in any relationship, to be in work, to be in anything, you've lost. That's why presence to ourselves is always the most important thing. All right, so here's some language. So this is from Alexander Solomon's book again. So we'll say stuff like, you need to, and leaning in is saying, I feel so, whatever. Trap, again, you make me feel, and I'll show you the XYZ statement. Why did you, and leaning in would be, what kept you from? Should or shouldn't, right? You should do this, you shouldn't do that. Give voice to what you actually want. So be very clear with what your expectations are and your needs are. Because most of the time we don't communicate expectations, and then we never get our needs met, and our expectations never get met, and they always fail, and we're always disappointed, but all we have to do is tell them what we want. It's so simple. Always or never, often, lately, rarely, it seems, right? So these are more vague. They offer, because we say like, you're never on time, but sometimes they're on time. But when we say you never, it doesn't allow us any space for connection. We can't see the human in them. How can I get my partner to label what you really want or need? So I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. Now, one really strong part of communication, especially in a couple, is to start with, I need to clear something with you. Do you have a moment? And we have to ask for permission. Often we bombard them. Now, when we ask them for permission, they have the right to say no, but they also, the rule becomes in the relationship that we have to come back to it within 24 hours. So that becomes the rule. And so often people will ask to have a conversation in the middle of a movie, in the middle of a football game, in the middle of a, we'll want to have these conversations where they're really tests, like, am I more important than them? Or we're feeling neglected by something else, so that's when we do it. but this is really starting to honor their choice to say yes or no to having the conversation by not flooding them. And we learn to build trust in that connection. So this is a simple format, communicating in truth. In situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z. And so it's, what is the situation? What's the behavior? And how do I feel? Right? So this is a simple structure, and it's great for work. It's a great structure for a workplace. And you know, really simply, there's so many ways to say no. No, no, thank you. No is a full sentence, right? It's a complete sentence. No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm currently too busy. Thank you for thinking of me. I need to focus on my work right now. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. Again, the 24-hour rule. If you touch me again, I'll break your finger. I like that one, because sometimes people need very assertive boundaries. If they're not listening, if they're not respecting them, they need consequences, right? In an Italian home. I grew up in an Italian household. The last one was the most common. Yeah, it's fair. So being really mindful that you need to escalate your response if the behaviors, remember, consequence has to be met if they actually violate the boundary. Otherwise, the boundary isn't really a boundary, it's a suggestion. It's gray, and it's not really real. And people will learn that over time. Okay. So here's the boundary framework that you can use. When blah, 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 the behavior or the situation, and you can do it as detailed and to the point as possible without any judgment or assessment language, just like when blah, blah, blah was said, I was left feeling, or the impact on me was, I felt, and you identify your feeling. It's important to me that my value, whatever your core value is honored, and in this case, being whatever the core value is, wasn't met. In the future, what would positively contribute to my experience in this relationship situation is, and we name the desired behavior. This is a really beautiful structure for things. It's just absolutely wonderful. And it's a great way to do it where we start to learn non-triggering language. I'll also send you, for the people in relationships, I'll send you a Imago dialogue, which is a form of communication that is structured so that couples can start to learn non-judgmental communication if both people learn like what the receiver and the sender, so the person expressing the need and the person receiving the need, it teaches us how to structure language in a different way. It's really wonderful. If we commit to doing it for 40 days, it's crazy because we could start to skip spots because it feels very clinical at first, but you can start to skip things and really get to the core with non-judgment. It's really powerful. And so now what, right? Like creating this future that we want. And so the first is, you know, I talked about this earlier. You know, we have an opportunity to be in charge of ourselves. We talked about this before, that we often don't even have presence around the people we're in. We have the worst boundaries with our smartphone. You know, that's such an example of where we all tend to suffer at boundaries. There's some people who are spectacular at it, but most of us are not. And it's a learned thing. We have to start to be more powerful than our need for dopamine, because dopamine is a short hit. It's cocaine, it's, you know, alcohol, it's casual sex. You know, it's all these different things, but we need to learn how to create and cultivate deep, loving relationships that release oxytocin and serotonin, and, you know, dopamine's released too. It's the, you know, the high of new love, the high of new experiences. So great couples do new things all the time, and that keeps the dopamine alive within the relationship. So coming back to this, like, what do we stand for? What's important to us? When you guys leave this call, what matters to you? What kind of life do you want to live? What kind of relationships do you want? How do you want to feel? And really coming back to, when you build these boundaries, what are you going to create? And I love that. I think like when we can look forward to something, it's so powerful. And knowing that you can either have your dreams or your excuses, but you can't have both. And we got to step into that space of always creating our dreams. And so this is the very final poll. I know some people don't like my swearing. That's totally fine. That's fair. It's fair. And I'm authentic. It comes out sometimes, you know. This is important to commit to, because when you guys put a commitment and you click, you're actually sending a message to yourself that you made a commitment public, and you've actually put your name on it. You're giving me your word here. You can't unclick, by the way, if you already clicked. You can't be like, shit, I don't want to give my word. And so, yeah, I get really excited. Yeah. Okay. So here's the results, right? Fuck yes. I know some people like the F word, other people don't. And it's in context. Okay, holla, I don't know. I was having fun. Okay. So guys and girls, questions. So we have the Q&A. So I'm going to go through Q&A in order that I received it. So hold on. Done. So I'm giving some shout outs. How do you manage conflicting boundaries with a loved one? Well, I think I just went through a lot of that. So, just how do you handle it? What do you do when one person's boundary is different than ours? We have to find common ground or compromise or not. We have to be open to them being okay with what they want and us being okay with what we want. So that could be something like, I want to have kids and my partner doesn't want to have kids, and that's their boundary and that's our boundary. And we have to understand that those are both of our deal breakers. And you can love someone a lot, but you'll resent them if you stay with them, if you're compromising a massive deal breaker. Okay, so what would you say would be a good way to set boundaries with a partner with addiction problems? There's a lot of great books on this. I think Codependent No More is a fantastic book, a good way to step into that. And it will teach you, I just went through the process of boundary setting and what that would look like and how to do that. So, that question was asked really early. I constantly let higher ups at work pile work on me and burning out due to fear of being fired. And when I say no, they tell me it's too bad, basically. How do I set a boundary there? Exactly how we talked about. You have to be willing. The choice is you either work at a place where you burn out and you end up losing yourself and getting sick, or you tell them exactly what's up. Like for me, I don't want to work at a company that doesn't honor and respect people, that like sets the standard where no one has boundaries. Like I've never liked workplaces that are like, well, the standard is you're here at 7 and you leave at 7. Last one here is the best worker. Fuck that bullshit. That's such bullshit. Some people spend all day on their computer at work, and that's what they're sitting around doing. So just recognizing like, how much is it worth for you to sell yourself out, like that. So it's an important thing to step into. Okay, so I constantly struggle with whether or not I'm shutting people out, or am I just learning how to set boundaries? That it really is necessary to do a sweep of multiple personal relationships. Is it common to have to walk away from several people when embarking on this path? It can be. The first thing we want to do is invite them. We have to decide if we want to invite them. Sometimes we can have very toxic relationships with family. Someone else said, what if it's your mother? It's your mom, but we have this message that if it's our mom, we have to do anything because they're family. No, we don't. A lot of us get incredibly sick because of this, because we stay in relationship with people who continue to wound us, especially if our parent was overwhelming, a narcissist, a sociopath, an addict. We will continue to be wounded by them. But remember, when you're dealing with addicts, narcissists, sociopaths, like anyone who's dysfunctional, which, a lot of us are dysfunctional, but I think that's more common than it isn't. Their healing is your healing. So if you're healing, that means that you're setting boundaries and you're taking care of yourself. That's the invitation to them to do the same. Okay. And so you might lose some people on the way. That is true. Okay, next question. I struggle with speaking up in the moment and even after. I get caught up with what I want to say, then time goes on and things may settle. Then I end up being a pressure cooker, ready to explode after a period of time, mostly in relationship. How do we learn what to say and how to say it in the moment in those situations where we want and we know we need to honor ourselves? As you begin to experience expressing boundaries, you will begin to experience confidence in yourself. We freeze, we don't know how to stay present, but remember this process I'm teaching you, which is Everybody can find 10 seconds of courage. That's from the movie Zootopia. Everybody has 10 seconds of courage. Everyone can dive deep into their soul and find 10 seconds to have the conversation, to say the thing we need, to feel the way we feel. And so it really is about stepping onto the edge and going to that space of, when I have handled conflict in the past, this has happened, but I can change the story. So it's old story versus new story. I'm ready to create a different life, a different way of being. And it's so important to me that I honor myself and my core values, that I will communicate this, that I will honor them. Okay. I only enmesh with men. Why is that? My relationships with family and friends have always had healthy boundaries. We usually enmesh when we're fear of losing someone. So I would argue that your friends and family have likely not had healthy boundaries, or your previous relationships have not had healthy boundaries. If you start to look up enmeshment, you'll probably start to see maybe some areas where your parents perhaps were putting too much on you, or were sharing too much, or something like that. But there is a fear of having your own identity, a fear of being your own self, because if you push people away, you'll lose them, you know, so you have to start to tap in to what that is. Okay, in your experience, how do we establish the healthy boundaries when they've been more porous than anything? We invite people to shift. We take responsibility for porous boundaries. We say, hey, you know, I've been pretty weak with the way I've been asking you for what I need. It hasn't been fair to you. And I want to be able to tell you what I need so you can meet it, so we can learn how to love each other and create a beautiful relationship. Okay, I'm feeling judged and shamed by my mother for a decision I've made about my marriage and family. How do I set boundaries around that? You follow that exact process and you communicate with them how you feel. You express that boundaries expression, right? The way you structure it, which you'll get a copy of. And you tell her, you know, how you feel, how it makes you feel when, you know, she expresses that way, and that you don't need her opinion, right? Like, the way she's speaking to you doesn't make you feel good or happy, and you, in order to positively contribute to the relationship moving forward, right? So it's really having the conversation that we were talking about structuring. Are you more likely to find the most authentic relationship for yourself when you stand in your true self? Or are you constantly required to be on guard with others? Yeah, you know, there's a really beautiful thought that whatever you want from a relationship, if you write that out, you have to be it. You have to become everything you want. And so the more authentic you are and standing in your true self, the more you will invite that from other people. And so you might initially be on guard from other people, but if you're constantly on guard and you don't believe in the best possibility of other people, are you going to attract people who are of the best possibility? No, we're not going to. Here, I'm just going to stop sharing so that, did that work? Okay, yeah, sorry guys. So you might be on guard for a little bit because you're going to be learning to trust yourself. You're going to be learning how to be who you are. You're going to be learning how to get into that space. I'm going to try to motor through these at 13 minutes. You mentioned some mentors and such. Can we get a list of books? Yes, I will definitely send you a list of books that are phenomenal for this. You mentioned that we create conflict and purpose based on our attachments. Can you explain more of that? Yeah, so often if we're not getting a need met, if we're afraid of being rejected, abandoned, whatever, we sometimes will create conflict in order to create connection. We'll start fights because the only way we were taught how to create connection was through fights. But we don't actually know how to create connection outside of that, you know? So often conflict can be our way of getting someone to prove that they care too. Like, do they care enough to fight with me? You know, I had a girl I was dating once who said, have you ever thrown anything at anyone? And I was like, no. And I was like, have you? This is scary. And she was like, yeah, I have. I threw a shoe once. And she's like, but do you ever think like you need to have that in order to have the crazy makeup sex after? And I was like, can't you just have good sex? Like, I don't understand why you have to throw shit at each other. But you know, like there's something about people needing that really high, hyper-driven nervous system is just part of their experience as children. So that's what they're used to. So if you realize you're enmeshed in a relationship and have been the doormat for some time, how do you unmesh and start having healthy boundaries without losing your relationship? You start to communicate with them what you've heard, what you learned, what you're thinking, and you ask what their opinion is. How do they feel about it? You know, we have to get curious, not in a space of conflict. So we start to get curious. We start to ask questions. We start to tell them about what we're learning. And man, you think they'd be really excited to understand this. And you want to learn how to build a healthier relationship with them because their relational health matters to you. I have definitely lived in denial in my past. Hey, yo, all of us. I'm open and love big, and at times when I saw signs that didn't go with my beliefs, I turned my cheek because it was too hard to face at the moment. I wanted to be there for my ex, and by wanting to be so loyal to standing beside him, I didn't realize it was not respecting my own boundaries and beliefs. I think I do this a lot and didn't realize that ignoring things is ignoring myself. Yes, a lot of us sell out to be support systems for people who don't even give us all of the love, you know, for people who don't even, you know, they don't actually even take the like, we make excuses for people who don't even make them for themselves. We allow people to walk on us. We allow people to choose how we're going to be in their life, not seeing that our deepest intention often is to be in a relationship with someone, but we'll accept a lesser version of that. So a boundary relationally has been crossed because we hope that they'll choose us. Well, we lost ourselves to keep them. We had to sell out our true intention. And I say, F that. I had to learn that one the hard way. Is it possible to be in a loving relationship with a narcissist or manipulator? I think that you know the answer to that. And we want to look at what is your definition of narcissist, all those different things, because often we'll call someone a narcissist because they're selfish or they have lots of needs or they ask for what they want. But really, we haven't even learned the boundaries to tell them no, to say that's not okay. And so we'll often not take responsibility for our side because we've been calling everyone narcissist these days. And that's not saying that's what you're doing, but that's what we do a lot now. We use the word narcissist far more than it's probably meant to be used. I get told I choose charity cases for relationships, but I look at seeing good and loving others. We're going to get good on this one. But I look at it as seeing good and loving others, maybe others don't see. I guess I would be considered the pursuer. I keep attracting similar guys where they are open and loving in the beginning and then eventually run since they're afraid. How do you know if you're too up and too fast to recognize the runner qualities in others quicker so you don't have to keep repeating? I would argue that you are ignoring massive red flags early in the relationship. I don't think that's probably, if you're open to them, you will begin to observe the red flags if you're open to them. Now, here's the challenge with being a fixer, because you're saying you pick charity cases. Here's the challenge with being a fixer. When we're a fixer, we do that often because we get to take care of them. So already we have a huge amount of power in the relationship because I'm here, I'm whole, you're broken, I'll fix you. So we've created a spot where we're needed. And so when we created a thing when we're needed, we help them heal. Well, guess what happens when they heal? They leave because this dynamic has made them in a hierarchy. You know, we're always the one mending them. We're the psychologist for them. We're the helper for them. We're the coach for them because we've created permanence, we think, in the relationship. We've also created a power dynamic. You need me. I have what you don't have, wholeness, whatever the thought is. And so when someone then starts to open up and then they get scared and they leave, you know, these people are not ready to be, maybe they're being overwhelmed. Maybe they're being, they're usually just out of relationships. That's common, or they're addicts or whatever. They're usually in some broken space. And so the real work is saying, I'm not going to date people who are in these situations. So we create standards and expectations in the beginning of the dating phase. So we sort out anyone who's within 3 months, 5 months out of a relationship. Now, these aren't always going to be true, but for people who often break this boundary, it's important that we have them there, that we say, we do not date anyone less than 6 months out of a relationship. And then the second part is, when do we start to, because if we fall really deep, really quick, especially with someone who's just getting out of a relationship, it's like they just got out of a car going 100 miles per hour and we get in their car because it's so easy. And because we're usually afraid of the time it takes and that we might not be loved, and we already picked someone who's already good at relationships. They just got out of a 4 or 5 year relationship. We're good. And so we have to start to pay attention to the way we bypass our true needs, the way we're not honoring what's true, the way we're not honoring what we observe. And we start, you know, I've dated for sure more than one girl who just got out of a relationship in my past. And I got to help them. I got to take care of them. I got to be the person who could tell them what they needed and why they were hurting and make it make sense. So that's some of it. I get passionate about that subject because, man, I've been there. Okay. So I've probably already fucked up my kids by oversharing with them during my recent separation and divorce. What is the best way to go forward so that their boundaries will be better than mine? Okay, so here's an invitation. First off, we have to start to see our language. I've already fucked up my kids by oversharing with them. I probably have. Imagine if they needed exactly what you did in order for you to understand what you now understand. We can always shift. We can always change. So now you have this invitation to teach your kids boundaries. You have this invitation to say, I want you kids to know, I don't know how old they are, but I want you to know that I didn't honor your boundaries. I told you too much and I put you in the middle of our divorce, our breakup, and that was not fair to you. So I want you to know that I am committed moving forward to honoring you emotionally and your roles so you could just be a child. I love your co-parent and I respect them and I respect you. You know, you don't have to be together to be great parents. That's a misnomer. Like we say, well, I need to stay together for the kids. No, you don't, because you're teaching kids to stay in relationships that they're not happy about. And then we put the responsibility on the child that we stayed in the relationship. And then they find out later when we're 25 that our parents stayed together till we were 18, like because of us. Fuck that. That's not fair. So we have to look what we're teaching them. And you can always teach people different. Children are beautifully open. We can always teach them more. And vulnerability and taking responsibility is so powerful to teach to a child. I still haven't gotten the part on attractiveness of the anger or fear pattern. It's like the victim and the persecutor type of dynamic. Yes, you have to start to think about the energy that you put out. When someone's like closed down and lower energetic, people who are dominant are attracted to that energy. So we start to stand in our power. We start to use our voice. We start to take care of ourselves. And it's a beautiful mix of so many different behaviors that does that. So it's just learning how to step into a place where you're in power and then there is no violent perpetrator type of dynamic or anger perpetrator. Why are we so attracted to people who are opposite to us and have conflicting boundaries and goals? And can we sustain a long-term relationship and be with them happily ever after? Are we better off to be with someone too similar or too opposite? There's no magic science. You know, we know that you have to be with someone who has similar values to you and similar beliefs and thoughts and goals. And every relationship has agreements. So you have to become mindful of what the agreements are and speak them into the future. Like tell them what you actually want to create and invite them to create with you. What do we want to create? The reason we're attracted to people like that is because we're being invited to heal something. We're being invited to repeat a pattern until we learn how to change it. So that's the beauty of relationship. You talk about how you don't have to defend your boundary, but what if your boundary is irrational or unreasonable? Wouldn't trying to defend it help to determine the validity or reasonableness of your boundary? Well, it's important to understand if your boundary is a wall, right? Or a reaction. So being able to decipher between the two, I can't do that for you. That's something you have to do. Is it based out of fear or is it based out of love, right? Like, am I creating this because I'm scared or I'm creating this because I love myself? You know, and am I being rigid or porous or am I being healthy? And so it's being able to look at that. You don't have to defend a boundary. You could tell me that you don't want to talk to me anymore and I can ask why, and you don't have to defend it. That's true. You don't have to defend it. Now there's likely a hurt behind there, so it's more of a wall. But you do not have to defend what you ask for. That's true. You have the right to everything you want. I'm still perplexed with when someone you love puts a boundary up and the deep down doesn't align. I don't understand what that means. I'm sorry. How does someone who reacts to the left, criticism, defensiveness, set boundaries with someone who reacts to the right, the eye-rolling person? Well, we have to start to deconstruct, as I told you, the antidotes to that. So all the behaviors have to be called out. Take responsibility for your own behavior, they take responsibility for theirs, and we create the desire to do something different, to create something more cohesive. Okay. Do you have any resources for determining your core values and therefore your boundaries around them? I'm having trouble defining them because I've always let them go. Yeah, I would read Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I'll put a note to send that. The video on YouTube I'll link. You can find the book, but I'll link the Simon Sinek video, and you can look that up. All right, let's see. If boundaries are flexible, negotiable, and gradual change, aren't they just suggestions, not boundaries? This leaves so much room for them never to come to fruition and ongoing tension, even if you follow up. No. So I hear what you're saying, but boundaries are only flexible once they've been met. Boundaries are only flexible if people are honoring them. Like if you honor my boundary, then I can move it. But if you don't honor my boundary, there's no negotiation. There's no movement. And so they're not suggestions. They are expectations and requirements to be in my life, to feel safe in my life, for me to feel safe, and for you to feel safe with me. Remember, boundaries are always an invitation for both people. That's what's important. And so you always have to give a consequence. And you have to be willing to pull that consequence out. You have to be willing to do that. So as the moment you don't, the moment you give a boundary and someone doesn't honor it, it is a suggestion. So it's not really a boundary. You're expressing something that you're not actually willing to do, which is selling ourselves out, which is abandoning ourselves, which is not creating our own identity and worth in the world. I tend to be pretty open about life. I obviously keep some things private, but I'm completely comfortable with sharing my life with others. How do I know if my sharing turns into poor boundaries? There is some Brene Brown information on oversharing versus just sharing. I'll put that in the follow-up. It sounds to me like they're pretty open. You could be I'm pretty open about life too. You know, like I share almost everything. It's not really a big deal to me. But for some people, they require much more privacy, and that's totally okay. But you'll start to learn. You could feel when you start to sell yourself out, the more attuned you get to who you are, the more you'll feel deviations, the more you'll see if I'm sharing to create connection. If I'm sharing in order to make you feel empathy for me or sensitivity for me or to feel like you owe me something, then like you'll sometimes see that with people who have a experience like a vulnerability, like they're an alcoholic or they're a survivor of something. They'll go to that very early in a conversation. Carolyn Myss talks about it. She calls it woundology. So she calls it woundology, and it's that we use wounds to create power. And so that's a whole other, the book Anatomy of the Spirit is brilliant. And if you look up woundology, I'll link a blog from her that's on woundology. So don't worry. Okay, I'm gonna do 2 more questions because my boundaries for time here, right? I guess I just don't know where to start with figuring out what my core values are and what my boundaries should be. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do the start with why, and you can start there. How do you approach a person who stonewalls? And any thoughts to repair a friendship when a friend doesn't take responsibility or is closed off? When all I want to do is feel like I don't want to make an effort anymore. Am I just going to old patterns? Am I setting boundaries? So if you don't want to give an effort anymore, that's probably because you're hurting, and that's totally fair. And you know, so how do you approach someone who stonewalls? So I have a friend who doesn't want to talk to me because of a conversation from like 4 years ago that was misinterpreted, and I didn't mean what they heard, but that's how they heard it, and that's totally fair. And I've reached out and expressed my concern and said, hey, I'd really like to build a relationship with you, and I'd like an opportunity to have a conversation about this. And the part of me that doesn't like to be abandoned or not liked or to not fit in, to not be liked by this person, it hurts. It does. It hits me in the core. But at the same time, I've done my best. I've expressed to them what I think, what I feel, and how important they are to me. But all we can do is invite people to meet us. We can't make them. And so it's really just honoring yourself and saying, like, I did my best, and that's all I can do. I'm responsible for my life, and today I'm showing up as my best self, and I did it, and that's it. And so if you don't want to make an effort anymore, I don't want to make an effort anymore with that person. The old pattern is probably wanting to make an effort again. The old pattern is probably actually pursuing it. It's saying, like, despite being hurt by them or stonewalled by them repeatedly, I'm still going to pursue the conversation and the relationship. That would be old pattern. Knowing that you're doing your best and that you're lovable and you're amazing as you are, and you're even asking this question, that is beautiful and a new pattern. Okay, one more. When you encounter a manipulative person, you can feel like you're going a little cray. What's a great question to ask yourself if you sense manipulation is overcoming you setting a boundary? What is a great question to ask yourself? Am I feeling manipulated here? Do I feel like I'm free to choose what I want? Do I feel free? You know, I think about that a lot in my relationships, in my work, and everything. Do I feel free to be myself in this experience? And if I'm feeling manipulated by what someone says, like, well, I can't believe you wouldn't do that. That would be gracious of you or something. Or, you know, if you don't, I'm going to feel upset. You know, like, I don't roll like that anymore. I'm done with that shit. And it's manipulative. So I think checking in with yourself. Okay, so I love all of you. And thank you so much for doing what, oh, you learned about me from Men Talks. Amazing. Yeah, Connor is a phenomenal guy. I'm seeing him tomorrow. You can have your dreams or your excuses, but you can't have both. That's going to be the one things you brought up tonight that I'm taking away with me. Thank you. You're so welcome. Relationship shine a spotlight on what we're not good at. Good. My question is, when is the next webinar or workshop? I think I'm going to be doing one with Louis Alaro on mindfulness and communication. We did it live, but we're going to do a webinar in March. You guys are all so great. I had so much fun, and you're all gonna, it takes a while for the video to process. So this is gonna take a bit, and then I'll upload it and I will send you the recording. So it'll have the Q&A, it'll have the transcript of the chat. And guys, we're all capable of having, guys and girls, sorry. We are all capable of having phenomenal, amazing relationships and boundaries and a fulfilling life. And it's just this learning that we just did is such a huge part of it. So I appreciate you coming here and giving me your time, which is your most precious resource. So thank you for being here. And I love you guys. I'm also going to sell a copy of the recording. So if you know anyone you think could benefit from this, the link will be up. I'll share it in the email to you guys that you can send to people. And I would be appreciative if you did that. So you guys, I love you all so much. Have the most wonderful weekend. And if you're watching this recording, I love you too.